A cold, sharp glint flashed in his eyes. Since that was the case, he would have to personally oversee Wang Chengxiao's departure. Having gained the advantage, Fang Chen no longer hesitated and immediately followed the Yao Lord out of the cave abode. The journey passed in silence. A gleam of shrewd light flickered in Fang Chen's eyes. He followed at a measured pace, asking tentatively, "Senior, I've forgotten how to address the Lord and you." The Yao Lord swept a glance at the heavenly thunderstone on Fang Chen's chest, a gentle smile curling at the corner of his mouth, and said slowly, "Our great lord is the master of Spirit Snake Mountain, the Black Dragon Great Lord." He paused, then added, "As for me, you may call me Venerable Soul Shadow." Fang Chen nodded slightly, cupping his hands in salute as he followed up, "Senior Soul Shadow, why is everyone heading to the interlayer world, but the Lord is not going?" He secretly thought to himself, this matter was indeed suspicious. The Golden Scale, Great Lord, and the powerhouses from all provinces are fighting to the death in the interlayer world. Even the Grand Libationer is stationed there. Yet this Black Dragon, Great Lord, relaxes in his cave abode without a care. How can that convince the experts of the provinces to submit willingly? Venerable Soul Shadow pondered for a moment before explaining, "Our Black Dragon, Great Lord, is in the midst of transforming into a dragon. It is inconvenient for him to act." Transforming into a dragon? Fang Chen showed a blank expression upon hearing this. Seeing this, Venerable Soul Shadow patiently explained, "Warriors of different schools all have different ways of stepping into the great sage realm, let alone between different races. You humans emphasize entering sagehood through merit, while we Yao emphasize atavism." Fang Chen couldn't help but fall into thought. He recalled the teachings of Bodhisattva Tianting. For Buddhist cultivators to enter the Buddha Lord realm, it is not about establishing merit, but about bringing salvation to all living beings. For example, the Sutra of Suppressing the Hells and Soothing Souls calms resentful spirits, which is a form of salvation for all living beings. However, in Fang Chen's view, this was still essentially a form of merit. After all, when he personally performed the Sutra of Suppressing the Hells and Soothing Souls, heavenly merit had descended from above. The difference between the two perhaps lies only in that establishing merit gains the faith of the living, while the scripture obtains the faith of the dead. Ultimately, they lead to the same destination by different paths. But for the Yao race to enter the great sage realm, it was an entirely different path, atavism. The so-called atavism is probably about continuously increasing the purity of one's bloodline until reaching the level of the ancestral true spirit. Once the atavism succeeds, one can transform into a true spirit. This Black Dragon, Great Lord, has already reverted half of his body into a snake tail. He is likely at a critical juncture of atavism, needing only the upper body to also revert, and then he can become a true spirit at the great sage realm in one fell swoop. Fang Chen nodded slowly, thinking to himself that coming to the myriad Yao Great Province this time had truly broadened his horizons. Venerable Soul Shadow patted him on the shoulder and exhorted in a friendly tone, "When you reach the interlayer world, kill the enemy well." After discussion among the many Yao of Spirit Snake Mountain, we intend to bring out the mountain's guardian treasure, the ancestral blood of myriad spirits, as a reward. Whoever has the greatest merit will have the chance to obtain the ancestral blood of myriad spirits. This blood can enhance the bloodline power of all Yao. As he spoke, a barely perceptible fervor flashed in his eyes, and he continued, "If our Lord can obtain enough ancestral blood of myriad spirits, he will have a chance to complete the final atavism and fully transform into a dragon. At that time, both you and I will soar to prosperity." These words were undoubtedly a grand illusion painted for Fang Chen. Venerable Soul Shadow had calculated clearly, as long as Fang Chen got hot, headed and charged recklessly into the horde of hellish beings, he would die a reasonable death among them. Hearing this, Fang Chen immediately showed surprise in his eyes. "Enhance the bloodline power of all Yao." Didn't that mean that the heavenly fox bloodline of Fairy Yunsheng, the Teng snake bloodline within Liulai, the unknown bloodline of Yao Lord Binghuo, as well as the bloodlines of Italkilin, Turncoat Boy, Little Tiger, Bai Luo Huangquan, along with Yao Emperor Nuxin, Fairy Chaiyu, West Sea Crown Prince, and others, could all be enhanced? This ancestral blood of myriad spirits is indeed a fine treasure. Thoughts raced through his mind, but his face showed a surge of intense motivation as he declared resolutely, "Senior, rest assured, this subordinate will lay down my life in utter devotion and serve with utmost loyalty until death." Venerable Soul Shadow couldn't help but touch his nose and secretly muttered to himself, "Could the grand illusion I painted really be that convincing?" Soon after, the two arrived at the center of the Spirit Snake mountain range. A huge, ferocious rift stretched across the land, nearly splitting the entire mountain range in two. Surging yin kai erupted from the depths of the mountains, shrouding this region as though with a pitch-black night curtain. As soon as Fang Chen stepped inside, the dense yin kai seeped through his pores straight into his dantian, attempting to tightly wrap around his nascent soul and hinder the circulation of his body's power. He hurriedly circulated the power of his nascent soul to barely force open the viscous yin kai. Fang Chen was secretly astonished. The concentration of yin kai here was even more overbearing than the underground world of the Heavenly Mechanism Pavilion. Cultivators below the nascent soul stage would find it absolutely difficult to endure for long. Just then, three enormous black creatures violently burst out of the rift. Two of them were at the level of 9 apertures nascent soul, while the one in the center, leading them, exuded the terrifying aura of the spirit transformation stage. Even Fang Chen, let alone Venerable Soul Shadow, was suddenly startled, and he exclaimed in shock, "A spirit transformation stage hellish being." 10 days ago, the Golden Scale Great Lord and the Ice Heart Great Lord had joined forces, but still failed to block the surging tide of hellish beings bursting out, causing massive casualties. Spirit Snake Mountain paid an extremely heavy price to annihilate all the hellish beings that surged out. But even that time, no spirit transformation stage hellish being had emerged. Yet now, one of the spirit transformation stage had actually run out. Could it be that the peril in the interlayer world, with reinforcements from various provinces, had instead become even more severe? Instinctively, Venerable Soul Shadow wanted to retreat, but his thoughts shifted, and he immediately shouted to Fang Chen, Wang Chengxiao, "I'll handle stopping this spirit transformation stage hellish being. The 2 9 apertures nascent soul ones are up to you. You must not disappoint the Lord." Fang Chen sneered inwardly. To send a human warrior at the 8 apertures, nascent soul cultivation, level against 2 9 apertures, nascent soul hellish beings. Even facing just one would be a near-death experience. Facing 2 was simply a dead end with no hope of survival. Venerable Soul Shadow intended to use the claws of hellish beings to kill him, so that after he died, he could seize the venom within his heavenly thunderstone. He feigned a panicked expression on his face and cried out urgently, "But I've forgotten my cultivation techniques. With only the venom, I'll face certain death." Venerable Soul Shadow paid no heed, pretending as if he hadn't heard at all. He rushed forward to intercept the spirit transformation stage hellish being that had a tiger-like form, deliberately engaging it in battle while moving away, leaving Fang Chen no chance whatsoever to call for help. Seeing this, Fang Chen was actually more than willing. Perfect, he could take the opportunity to shake off this Venerable Soul Shadow. With an ear-splitting roar, a ferocious hellish being stretching 1,000 zhang long and resembling a monstrous earthworm howled as it charged straight towards Fang Chen. Without a second thought, Fang Chen instantly launched a soul, shaking thorn condensed to its utmost limit. In an instant, the hellish being's soul was ruthlessly pierced, and its massive body writhed in agony, rolling wildly on the spot. "Go!" Fang Chen formed a sword with 2 fingers, and purple lightning responded by unsheathing. Purple electric light condensed around the sword's body, transforming into a dazzling, brilliant sword silhouette that cleanly slashed through the hellish being's head. The other hellish being, seeing Fang Chen so ferocious, let out a terrified shriek and turned to flee. Shadow in the clouds. Fang Chen's figure instantly caught up, sweeping like a phantom onto its back. In his palm, he condensed a speck of pure thunder essence and slammed it down viciously. That hellish being was blasted apart on the spot by the thunder essence, its huge head turning into a cloud of scarlet blood mist. With a heaven-shaking muffled boom, its enormous body crashed to the ground, sending dust billowing into the sky. Fang Chen expressionlessly recalled purple lightning and was about to flash towards the deep, dark rift. A clear, ethereal voice tinged with slight surprise leisurely reached his ears. What domineering methods! Fang Chen was suddenly alarmed. There was actually someone nearby, yet he had not detected their presence at all. He turned his head to look, and only then realized that at some unknown moment, a peerless beauty had appeared standing elegantly not far to his side. She wore an inquash long dress that floated ethereally like a fairy, her black hair cascading like a waterfall, and her fair face was exquisitely carved with features of breathtaking beauty. Although every woman around Fang Chen could be called a beauty, this young woman of about 20 still brought him a heart-thumping sense of stunning charm. But what shocked Fang Chen the most was that a divine halo was manifesting behind her head, clearly bearing 5 flame marks upon it. A great lord of the 5 decays of heaven and man. And she was only 20 years old, barely a year or 2 older than Fang Chen. Turbulent waves surged in Fang Chen's heart. How on earth had she cultivated to such a degree? He had seen the master of Myriad Stars Mountain, who was in his early 30s, and already thought him monstrously heaven-defying. For ordinary people, breaking through to the deity transformation realm required an exceedingly long time. Among the deity transformation venerables of Taking Grand Prefecture, aside from Venerable Zhenyan, who was 25 or 6, who was not middle-aged or older. Yet the woman before him had actually cultivated to the pinnacle of the mortal world at the mere age of 20. In that moment, Fang Chen truly and vividly understood what it meant that beyond the heavens there are heavens, and beyond people there are people. He immediately collected his mind, cupped his hands in salute, and said, "Junior Wang Chengxiao pays respects to Senior Wang Chengxiao." The woman muttered softly, "That name has been surprisingly common lately." With that, she said calmly, "Wait here for a moment." As soon as her words fell, her entire figure vanished from the spot without a trace. A moment later, an extremely ear-piercing scream suddenly rang out from the horizon. Immediately after, she instantly returned, and beside her followed Venerable Soul Shadow, his face filled with awe and reverence. The woman looked at Fang Chen and his companion, her tone flat yet brooking no doubt. "You two have decent strength, especially you, Wang Chengxiao. You have considerable potential. It would be a pity to die in there. Follow behind me and do not stray far." With a great venerable personally protecting him, how could Fang Chen refuse? He hurriedly thanked, "Thank you, Senior." "May I ask how I should address you?" "I am the Ice-Heart Great Venerable of the Sacred Spirit Prefecture." The woman in fluttering immortal robes replied without turning her head. Fang Chen silently committed the name to memory and quickly strode forward to follow. Venerable Soul Shadow glanced at the two enormous hellspawn corpses on the ground, couldn't help frowning, and murmured to himself, "This brat is too damn lucky. I thought he was already dead, yet he ended up being saved by the Ice-Heart Great Venerable." As he watched Fang Chen's gradually receding back, a hint of icy cold light flickered in his eyes, and he whispered to himself, "No rush. There will be plenty of chances for you to die in there." Led by the Ice-Heart Great Venerable, Fang Chen stepped into that deep, dark fissure. This fissure led straight into the depths of the earth, as if piercing through the 9 nether springs of the underworld. The bone-piercing yin-kai, like an erupting volcano, rolled out endlessly, carrying with it chilling, mournful wails. One after another, hideous hellspawn burst out from the dark passageway, only to be instantly slain by a casual wave of icy light from the Ice-Heart Great Venerable. Fang Chen followed closely and asked, "Senior Ice-Heart, what is the current situation in the interlayer world?" Although the Ice-Heart Great Venerable was a Great Venerable of the 5 Decays of Heaven and Man, she showed no airs at all at this moment. As she cleared the obstacles ahead, she patiently explained, 10 days ago, the Grand Libationer failed to seal the breach of the interlayer world, and a vast swarm of hellspawns are jet out. In these past few days, strong experts from various prefectures have arrived to support, and are doing their utmost to drive the hellspawn back toward the exit. The Ice-Heart Great Venerable paused slightly, then her tone turned more solemn. "However, they are fiercely counterattacking. The deity transformation, hellspawn just now, was a straggler that broke through the encirclement." Hearing this, Fang Chen's pupils shook violently. In his heart, the Grand Libationers of all prefectures were unfathomable supreme existences, capable of matching even the sages. How could she have failed to seal the breach? Could there be entities in the interlayer world that even a Grand Libationer could not handle? The Ice-Heart Great Venerable saw his doubt and spoke again. "Currently, our Central Earth experts are divided into 3 routes, south, east, and west, working together to force back the hellspawn. The young Emperor is in charge of the southern route. I lead a group of experts on the eastern route, and the Golden Scale Great Venerable commands another group on the western route." Fang Chen was taken aback and asked, puzzled, "Is the young Emperor alone?" The Ice-Heart Great Venerable gave a slight nod and said flatly, "He does not need others. He handles the southern route alone, and furthermore, he is the fastest advancing among the 3. These words shocked Fang Chen considerably. The young Emperor alone was enough to send an entire direction's hellspawn army into retreat after retreat. This speed was actually faster and more ferocious than the combined forces of the east and west routes of Central Earth. Even though they were all at the 5 Decays of Heaven and Man realm, the young Emperor was far, far stronger than the Ice-Heart Great Venerable and the Golden Scale Great Venerable, wasn't he? The Ice-Heart Great Venerable remained calm and said slowly, "The young Emperor is the strongest 5 Decays cultivator in Central Earth, and he cultivates the Thunder Path, which specifically counters hellspawn. Naturally, he sweeps all before him. It is only normal that Golden Scale and I are no match for him. The strongest 5 decays of heaven and man. Fang Chen's heart sank. Was the young emperor truly that powerful? The ice-hot Great Venerable raised her eyes to look ahead, and urgency crept into her tone. Our eastern route cannot fall too far behind. Otherwise, if the young emperor charges in alone, he could easily be surrounded. As she spoke, the ice-heart Great Venerable had already brought the two of them to the underground depths. With a swift movement, she landed on a severely shattered cliff. Fang Chen followed and looked out. An endless expanse of black earth instantly unfolded before his eyes. On that earth, hellspawn surged like a tidal wave, roaring and shoving, stretching as far as the eye could see with no end in sight. They poured in endlessly from the deeper darkness, as if infinite and inexhaustible. Below the cliff, hundreds of powerful experts from the demon and human races had formed a thin yet tenacious defensive line, desperately resisting the hellspawn's onslaught. This scene was so similar to that of the Boundary Mountain back then, wasn't it? But the difference was that the hellspawn before him were not only countless in number, their ferocity far surpassed that of the demons. Just as these thoughts rose in his mind, a female cultivator at the Nascent Soul stage was instantly pierced through the chest by a sinister red beam of light. Immediately, the swarming hellspawn swamped and devoured her. In the blink of an eye, not even her bones remained. And similar tragic scenes kept repeating from time to time. Fang Chen's fists clenched involuntarily, the veins on the back of his hands bulging. These were all backbone forces that would soon defend against the ancient giants. Yet now they were all perishing miserably here. These accursed hellspawn who on earth let them out. At that moment, from deep within the hellspawn tide, that annihilating aura soared skyward once more. The Iceheart Great Venerable's gaze sharpened, and she said gravely, "Another deity transformation, hellspawn, is coming. You two join the defense line, but act according to your strength. Do not overexert yourselves." As her words fell, she had already flashed away. Fang Chen, already impatient, immediately launched himself downward. Venerable Soul Shadow stood where he was, only breathing a slight sigh of relief once Fang Chen had gone far. That meddlesome person had finally left. Now all that remained was to wait for Fang Chen to die in the mouths of the hellspawn. He raised a finger and pointed to the sky, speaking loudly, "Wang Chengxiao, don't be afraid. Slay as many hellspawn as you can to earn ample rewards." Fang Chen looked up and saw countless crystals floating densely in the sky, continuously recording the battlefield in real time. Afterward, contributions would be assessed by replaying the recordings from these crystals. But now how could Fang Chen care about contributions or rewards? He ignored Venerable Soul Shadow entirely and dived straight down, plunging into the battlefield. Somewhere on the defense line. Jiang Wang held the sword case in his hands, holding his breath and concentrating utterly. With a series of finger flicks, beams of 9, colored sword light instantly shot out. Wherever the sword light passed, the hellspawn were precisely sliced into uniform pieces, scattering and dissipating. Behind him were the Nascent Soul experts from the 3 divine sects and 7 great orders of Taking Grand Prefecture, all of them uniformly 8 orifice Nascent Soul cultivators. Taking Grand Prefecture was nothing like other prefectures teeming with experts. Every 8 orifice Nascent Soul cultivator was an immensely valuable combat asset. Losing even one would be cause for immense regret. And this time, Taking Grand Prefecture had sent a full 10 orifice Nascent Soul cultivators. The scale of their support was easy to imagine. Yet, even with the deity transformation, Venerable Jiang Wang holding the line ahead, their situation was far from good. Song Lingyu's face was slightly pale, her breathing growing erratic, clearly showing signs of power depletion. She clenched her silver teeth and thought in alarm, what's going on? Why are the hellspawn growing more and more numerous? As the battle dragged on, their defense line was not pushed forward. Instead, it was being forced to retreat further and further. Jiang Wuya, his expression cool, hit the nail on the head. It's the young emperor. He's advancing northward, forcing the hellish creatures in that direction to scatter east and west, which is why we're facing more and more of them head on. The Nascent Soul cultivators of Taking Prefecture felt their expressions darken instantly. Their force was positioned at the very center of the defense line, bearing the most ferocious onslaught. Now, with the pressure suddenly intensifying, the situation had become perilous. The hellish creatures were already intelligent enough. Sensing this opportunity, they charged even more madly, throwing away all regard for their lives. Worse still, several 9 orifice Nascent Soul level hellish creatures had quietly blended into the beast tide, slipping up to the front lines without a sound. Just as Zhang Wuya had unleashed a strike with all his strength, they seized the opening, suddenly leaping out to strike, each firing deadly red beams at different powerful cultivators. They actually intended to use Taking Prefecture as the breach point to tear a gaping hole in the entire defense line. Jiang Wuya's expression drastically changed, and he bellowed, "Watch out." His sleeves billowed continuously, gusts of energy surging forth, instantly dispersing several red beams. However, one beam still slipped through the net, hurtling straight towards the chest of that 8-orifice, nascent soul old woman from the Great Yin sect. That beam came far too fast, leaving absolutely no time to react. In the next instant, her body shuddered violently as the red beam cleanly pierced through her chest. By her side, Song Lingyu's face transformed in an instant. She caught her and cried out in a lost voice, "Senior Yun Zun." But that very act of catching her played right into the hellish creature's hands. Another lurking 9-orifice, nascent soul hellish creature suddenly opened its blood-drenched maw and spat a more concentrated red beam at Song Lingyu. In a flash, that lethal crimson radiance completely engulfed Song Lingyu. Her heart lurched, a scorching heat so intense it could incinerate the soul surged toward her, chilling her entire body. Yet, just as she was about to share the same fate as perfected one Yun Zun, an unparalleled lightning sword slashed fiercely from behind her, carrying the force of 1,000 thunder bolts, and obliterated the blood-colored beam that was only inches away. After slashing apart the beam, the lightning sword's momentum did not diminish, and it struck forcefully into the horde of hellish creatures. Under the rampant power of thunder, those hellish creatures had no power to resist. Their yin energy instantly dissipated, and their hideous bodies crackled and burst apart in the lightning. In an instant, an entire swath of hellish creatures was completely swept clean. That ambushing 9-orifice, nascent soul hellish creature was also struck by the lightning sword, its body charred black, letting out a miserable shriek as it desperately shrank back. Everyone was shocked and turned to look behind them simultaneously. Wasn't that the indestructible blade of the Myriad Tribulations' Holy Temple? Had a powerhouse from the Myriad Tribulations' Holy Temple come to reinforce them? Song Lingyu, who had already despaired, turned her head back in a mix of shock and joy, but what met her eyes was an unfamiliar middle-aged face. She couldn't help but exclaim in astonishment, "You are..." The newcomer was naturally Fang Chen. Without waiting for them to react, he shouted in a concentrated voice, "Don't lose focus. The hellish creatures are still increasing." In that brief moment, the blank zone created by the indestructible blade was immediately filled again by other frenzied hellish creatures. Fang Chen did not hesitate. He decisively swung the snow-listening sword. One sweeping strike sent astonishing cold instantly freezing a patch of hellish creatures, then fierce sword Kai crisscrossed, shredding them into countless ice crystals. Following that, he flipped his wrist, and the purple lightning divine sword, with its violet lightning that could cut anything, unsheathed again, mowing down another area. Finally, the Azure Frost sword rang out as it left the scabbard, unleashing a dense array of thousands of green afterimages like coiling dragon roots, violently impaling one hellish beast after another. 3 swords unleashed simultaneously, they actually forcibly cleared an area of 1,000 zhang in front of Taking Prefecture in an instant. This scene left everyone from Taking Prefecture dumbfounded. Song Lingyu wore an expression of doubting life itself, murmuring, "He's also an 8-orifice nascent soul, then what am I?" All the 8-orifice nascent soul cultivators present also looked completely blank. Both were 8-orifice nascent souls, but why was the gap even greater than that between a human and a dog? It was estimated that even if they brought out their entire family fortunes, it probably wouldn't be enough to withstand these 3 swords. Even Zhang Wuya couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, praising 3 supreme grade spirit swords, and each with an artifact spirit, since when did Taking Prefecture have such an expert? This shocking scene instantly drew the sidelong attention of powerful cultivators from the surrounding prefectures. The 3 swords acting together like a merciless crusher, pushed through everything, forcefully emptying the hellish creatures before Taking Prefecture. The crowd was uncertain and alarmed, and they began to discuss among themselves who exactly spread the rumor that Taking Prefecture has no powerhouses. If an 8-orifice nascent soul is this ferocious, wouldn't a spirit transformation cultivator be defying the heavens? Hearing this, Zhang Wuya felt a sense of shame. Then his gaze sharpened, and he said in a deep voice, "With such a strong ally aiding Taking Prefecture, how can I shrink back?" He leaped, charging boldly forward with his sword case. Countless sword intents weaving through the beast, tied like a meteor shower. Song Lingyu and the others also felt their spirits rally, forcing themselves to press on, joining Donghua and Fang Chen in blasting the hellish creatures. For a time, the defense line held by Taking Prefecture actually pushed forward against the tide. But only their sector pushing forward was utterly meaningless. Because once a gap appeared behind them, the hellish creatures on the left and right would seize the chance to surge past. Some would encircle Fang Chen and the others from behind, while others would directly strike the flanks of the other two prefectures' defense lines, ultimately leading to the collapse of the entire defense line. Even more troublesome was that as the young emperor relentlessly advanced from south to north, more and more hellish creatures came flooding in. Fang Chen's nascent soul power was down to less than 30%, and his physical strength was also bottoming out. His entire body was drenched in sticky black blood, like a blood-soaked figure who had slaughtered his way out of hell. He could no longer remember how many hellish creatures he had killed. He only knew that the overall defense line was not advancing, but instead constantly retreating. His individual strength was indeed formidable, but in a battle of such scale, it was ultimately just a drop in the bucket. This was a calamity that even a great venerable of the 5 decays of heaven and man would struggle to stop alone. What could Fang Chen possibly do? But all he could do at the moment was to resist as much as possible. He could only hope that the great libationer and the 3 great venerables could seal that breach soon. Just then, an urgent shout came from the right. "Watch out, there's a spirit transformation." Before the words finished, a muffled, thunderous sound of something tearing through the air came from the void. On the right were the demonic cultivators from Great Wilderness Prefecture, led by the Red Dust Venerable, who was at the 2nd decay of heaven and man. She was struggling to hold the line with the demonic cultivators. A terrifyingly powerful spirit transformation stage hellish creature had mingled in the beast tide and stealthily crept up to the front line. By the time Red Dust Venerable noticed, she had already been ambushed. Her right shoulder blade, along with her entire arm, had been severed cleanly by razor, sharp claws and fangs. An ordinary-looking two-headed hellhound, its eyes gleaming with mockery, stepped over, muttering hellish gibberish. Its meaning seemed to be, "At last, that terrifying woman has been lured away. Now we can leave the underground world." It turned out that the spirit transformation aura discovered earlier by Great Venerable Bingxin was merely a diversion, a scheme to lure the tiger away from the mountain. Its purpose was to buy this hellhound a chance to burst out from underground. This beast, capable of wounding the 2nd decay Red Dust Venerable with a single bite, left no doubt about its strength. It was at least at the 2nd decay level. Red Dust Venerable also recognized the enormous danger. She endured the severe pain and yelled sharply, "We can't hold on. People of Great Wilderness Prefecture, retreat quickly. Don't make pointless sacrifices." Upon hearing this, the faces of everyone from all prefectures changed. If Great Wilderness Prefecture was retreating, and they held their ground, they would surely be completely surrounded by hellish creatures slipping around behind them. They had come to support Myriad Demons Prefecture, not to throw their lives away. Thus, the powerful cultivators from all prefectures began to waver, thoughts of retreat sprouting. Seeing this, Fang Chen inwardly cursed. Their retreat would be easy, but once such a colossal number of hellish creatures burst out from underground, the operations on the western and southern fronts would be declared a failure. The plan to push back the hellish creatures would completely fall apart. The most direct consequence would be that the breach in the interlayer world could never be sealed again. Endless hellish beings would surge forth until they overran the entire 10,000 demons' grand state. Before the ancient giants even arrived, the central plains would lose one grand state. And what of Ling Shu and Liu Lai, whose whereabouts were already unknown? They would likely be plunged into even greater peril. Jiang Wuya, with extreme reluctance, roared in a low voice, "Our taking grand state withdraws as well." But he had to consider the powerhouses of the 3 divine sects and 7 great orders he had brought with him. With all other states retreating, for taking grand state to remain alone would be like an egg hurled against a rock. Fang Chen's eyes flickered with violent emotion, his heart burning with anxiety. What could he do? Watching the tide, like torrent of hellish beings surging toward him, a thread of despair actually rose in his heart. Even if the great venerable himself came, he probably couldn't stem this flood. What could one man do alone? These hellish creatures were brutal and bloodthirsty, with base intellects that knew nothing of death's meaning. Fang Chen suddenly froze. The hellspawn were indeed fearless, but there was something he had brought from the subterranean world of the heavenly secret pavilion that they ought to fear, was there not? That was an artifact belonging to a hell sovereign, the Hell Soul Bell. Back then, that nascent soul-level hellish twin-headed hound had wanted to devour Fang Chen, but the moment it saw this bell, it bowed down in fear and acknowledged him as master. At this thought, Fang Chen decisively produced the Hell Soul Bell. Yet the hellish horde before him seemed not to register the bell's existence and continued its savage advance. Seeing this, Fang Chen did not hesitate and shook the bell. A piercing chime erupted abruptly, radiating outward in all directions. Upon hearing this sound, the once fierce and brutal hell beasts all halted in their tracks, their eyes showing extreme terror. Their colossal frames trembled and quaked. They kept looking around, trying to locate the source of that dread, inducing sound. Across the vast battlefield, the countless beasts tied as the ringing spread, calmed in an instant like ice water dashed into a boiling cauldron. The red dust venerable clutched his severed arm, his face awash with shock and incomprehension. What is happening? Why have they suddenly stopped moving? Powerhouses from the various states who had been about to withdraw were likewise filled with startled doubts. Hellbeasts had always been fearless of death. Even if a great venerable of the Five Decays personally intervened, they could not block those creatures' determination to charge out. En masse, there was no reason for them all to stop at once. That deity transformation, level hellish twin, headed hound pricked up its ears, terror flashing in its eyes. Clearly it had heard the bell, and it knew exactly what that signified. But having finally glimpsed a chance to break through the defensive line and return to the surface, how could they give up now? Suppressing the dread in its heart, it raised its heads to the sky and howled a command, "Do not stop, keep charging forward." Cowed by its pressure, the hellbeasts who had halted began moving again, starting a new round of charges. Seeing this, Fang Chen decisively employed the art of selfless purification and slipped into invisibility. Then, stealthily, he shook the Hell Soul Bell. Clanged. That harsh ringing seemed to have no particular effect on humans and demons. To them, it was just a metallic scraping noise. But to the hellbeast's ears, it carried an indescribably commanding authority. The hellbeast army, which had just begun to move again, halted uneasily once more. The hellish twin-headed hound shrieked in fury, "Charge, no stopping." Just as the hellbeasts prepared to move, Fang Chen shook the bell again, paralyzing them with fear. "Charge." Clang, clang tilde. "All of you charge." Clang, clang, clang. "Charge quickly." Clang, 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 clang tilde. Finally, the hellish twin-headed hound completely broke down. It lifted both dog heads and howled furiously. "Just who in the hell is that bastard? If you've got guts, come out and fight me. Fight me." But the only response was Fang Chen ceaselessly shaking the Hell Soul Bell. The hellish twin-headed hound seethed with rage, trying to prick up its canine ears to trace the source of the sound. Unfortunately, this was a battlefield, already chaotic and cacophonous, and the person shaking the Hell Soul Bell was even more dog-like than this hound itself, constantly shifting positions so that its location was impossible to pinpoint. And what was worse, he only shook it with increasing vigor. As the bell tolled on without pause, the hellbeasts finally felt overwhelming unease and began to retreat. It started with those nearest to the Hell Soul Bell, then the panic spread, sir. Rounding hellbeasts also fell back, until whole swaths of them turned tail and fled. No matter how the hellish twin-headed hound bellowed, it could no longer stop them. That spectacle perfectly embodied the collapse of a mortal army routing in utter defeat. Witnessing the mass retreat, Fang Chen stowed the Hell Soul Bell, quietly dropped his disguise, tugged the sleeve of the still, dazed Donghua and whispered, "What are you wait? G4, go grab the credit." Donghua snapped out of it as if waking from a dream. With a sweep of his sleeve, he swept up taking Grand Statespeople and gave chase. Spirit Snake Mountain had promised ample rewards. Even if they didn't claim the top credit, they could eventually exchange their kills for corresponding resources. Songling Yu also came to her senses, her eyes shining as she cried out, "Don't run. If you run, who am I supposed to repay my debt to Fang Chen with?" With such astonishing rewards on offer, she had to seize this chance to exchange for a few heaven-soaring pills so she could clear her debt to Fang Chen and redeem her poor disciple. So with a single bound, she launched herself out, chasing the hellbeasts from behind, slaughtering them without sparing soul power. So much so that for a time she killed even more Hand the deity transformation. Level Donghua. Fang Chen nodded slowly and muttered to himself, "It seems that one truly shouldn't be too well fed. A little debt provides motivation." Having said that, he joined the fray himself. The hellbeasts cared only for fleeing for their lives. Even with pursuers snapping at their heels, they dared not pause. They could only, in their panic, look back and strike blindly once in token retaliation. With that, Fang Chen completely let loose. He surged forward with sweeping dopant strikes, cutting them down like splitting bamboo all along the way. The hellish twin-headed hound, driven into a rage by the pursuit, was on the verge of whirling around and taking Grand State's people to shreds. But just then, the powerhouses of the other 8 Grand States reacted as well. One by one, their eyes bloodshot, they let out howling roars and pounced forward, competing to be first. Several deity transformation venerables even locked onto it with their Kai senses. All of them schemed to chop off this dog head and bring it back for immense credit. This show of force sent the hellish twin-headed hound turning tail and sprinting away without hesitation. It blended into the routed flood of hellbeasts and surged madly toward that gap. Now gazed deeper into the beast tide. There, great venerable Iceheart's hand rose and fell with her sword. A sharp, icy light flashed, and a deity transformation, hellbeast lurking within the horde, was instantly cleaved into beneath her blade. Her brows, delicate as willow leaves, furrowed slightly as she looked toward the gap and the unending flood of hellbeasts pouring in from the south. A sense of helplessness rose in her heart. She pondered in silence. It seemed this gap truly could not be plugged. Just then, the sleeve of her robe vibrated softly. A golden, gleaming scale flew out of her sleeve of its own accord. This was precisely the communication scale that Great Venerable Golden Scale had given to her and the young emperor. By sensing each other through these scales, they could communicate in real time within this subterranean world and stay aware of each party's movements. A ray of golden light spilled from the scale, projecting into the air and clearly manifesting the images of Great Venerable Golden Scale, the young emperor, and their surroundings. Great Venerable Golden Scale wore a helpless expression as he hovered behind a group of demon cultivators from Spirit Snake Mountain. Those demons were desperately resisting the Beast Tide's armies, which surged like endless ocean waves. Though they fought with desperate valor for the homeland at their backs, they still could not withstand the savage onslaught of the tide. The entire defensive line teetered on the brink of collapse, ready to break at any moment. With a single palm strike, Great Venerable Golden Scale could sweep away vast swaths of the beast tide. But in the blink of an eye, that emptied space was packed solid once more by the endlessly surging hellbeasts. Great Venerable Golden Scale asked, uneasy, "Great Venerable Iceheart, what is your situation?" Great Venerable Iceheart shook her fair head slightly and replied in a grave tone, "I am in the deepest part of the tide, but this situation is most dire as well. The defensive line is very likely already broken through." Upon hearing this, the Golden Scale Great Venerable could not help but let out a helpless sigh. This situation was entirely within his expectations. The demon clans of Spirit Snake Mountain, as natives of this state, fought desperately but still could not stave off the collapse. Those powerhouse experts from other states would naturally not easily risk their lives in a death struggle, so it was only logical that the defense line broke. Now, looking at another projection screen, one could see the young emperor face the fleeing beast tide ahead, giving a casual flick of his finger. A thunder origin, imbued with an aura of destruction, instantly flew deep into the beast tide and erupted on the spot. Boundless lightning surged and poured out, swallowing a vast area in the blink of an eye. By the time the blinding lightning had fully dispersed, the ground was left with only steaming yin energy rising from scattered limbs and shredded flesh. The hellish beings that had been brandishing fangs and claws just moments before were now completely annihilated. The young emperor swept a cold gaze over the two battlefields and spoke indifferently, "My southern route has been cleared. There is no longer anything here that concerns me." At these words, the Golden Scale Great Venerable immediately felt his face flush with shame, and even the Iceheart Great Venerable felt somewhat embarrassed. Between the two of them, one led the demon clan army, while the other commanded reinforcements from various states. Yet both were facing the dire predicament of their defense lines collapsing. Yet the young emperor, alone and unaided, single-handedly drove an entire route's worth of hellish beings back into the breach. This invisible contrast left a truly bitter taste in their hearts, as they too were at the heavenly, human Five Declines realm. Just then, the Iceheart Great Venerable suddenly looked down at the beast tied beneath her feet, a trace of surprise appearing on her jade-like countenance. Gazing intently, she saw that the beast tide that had been surging toward the defense line had gradually come to a halt. Very soon, they began to turn around and retreat in panic toward the breach. And each one wore a terrified expression, their panicked wails rising one after another, as if fleeing from something dreadful. The Golden Scale Great Venerable also noticed this and asked in astonishment, "Iceheart Great Venerable, could it be that powerful reinforcements from another state have arrived?" The Iceheart Great Venerable shook her head and replied, "No, The latest reinforcements are an 8 apertures Nascent Soul from taking Great State. She paused, then added with doubt, moreover, what kind of reinforcements could frighten off the entire Eastern Route's hellish beings? Could it be that a sage has intervened? The Golden Scale Great Venerable's eyes lit up, but then he shook his head and denied. None of the sages stationed in the Central Plains can move about freely. They are either injured or restricted by special circumstances, yet aside from a sage taking action, who else could frighten off the entire Eastern Route's hellish beings? Not to mention him, even the young emperor halted his pursuit of the hellish beings, stopped in his tracks, and gazed intently at the Iceheart Great Venerable's projection. Under the scrutinizing gazes of the 3 Great Venerables, after about half a cup of tea's time, the boundless beast tide finally showed its end. The 3 of them instantly focused their gaze behind the beast tide, wanting to see what kind of extraordinary being it was. However, the scene that met their eyes left all 3 experts at the heavenly human Five Declines realm utterly silent. They saw a woman dressed in palace attire, panting heavily as she chased after the hellish beings and shouting loudly, "Big brother hellish being ahead, you dropped your money." Upon hearing this, the running hellish being glared back at her viciously. The meaning in its eyes was unmistakable. "You think we're fools?" It turned out that, after chasing for so long, the people from taking Great State were already utterly exhausted and gradually unable to keep up with the hellish beings' frantic escape speed. In desperation, they could only try every means to trick the enemy into stopping. Fang Chen also took a deep breath. After incessant slaughter for half a cup of tea's time, he had long lost count of how many hellish beings he had slain. He only felt that his entire body's strength was nearly exhausted, and even the hand gripping the sword trembled slightly. At this moment, he could no longer muster the strength to activate the 3 supreme Raid Spirit swords. Watching the fleeing beast tied about to reach the breach, if he didn't seize the moment to kill a few more, there would likely be no further opportunity. In his urgency, he suddenly opened his mouth and shouted in the Hell language, "Brother up ahead, you dropped your ox." Several hellish beings in full sprint subconsciously clenched their legs, their running speed abruptly slowing. Seizing this opportunity, Fang Chen immediately threw himself forward, condensing the last wisp of thunder power in his body into a Hell Lotus and hurling it fiercely among them. A heaven-shaking boom rang out, instantly blasting 3 hellish beings flat on their backs, each with mouths agape, jabbering in the Hell language. Undoubtedly, they were offering Fang Chen some exceptionally cordial and friendly greetings. But what awaited them was the swarm of powerhouses from taking Great State. Under a barrage of bombardment, they were beaten until not even their corpses remained. The 3 Great Venerables stood rooted on the spot, dumbfounded. The Golden Scale Great Venerable's eyelid twitched, and he coughed dryly, "These are experts from your heaven state, aren't they? They really have quite the personality." The young emperor spoke faster than usual, immediately denying, "Absolutely not from our heaven state." The Iceheart Great Venerable looked at Fang Chen's middle-aged face, somewhat speechless, a man of such age, yet still so flippant. Nevertheless, she still couldn't fathom why these hellish beings were fleeing so panic-stricken. Could it be that someone had done something that terrified hellish beings to the extreme? Her gaze fell back on Fang Chen and she pondered inwardly. It is most likely this person's doing. The only variable along the entire defense line was his presence. But she did not voice her speculation. For one person's power to be able to drive endless hellish beings, this would be an appalling matter throughout the Central Plains. It would be extremely easy for those with ill intentions to take notice and try to use him to control the method of manipulating hellish beings. Moreover, he was currently only at the 8 apertures Nascent Soul stage. It would be akin to a child parading through the market with a gold ingot, far too dangerous. So, without changing expression, she calmly said to the young emperor and the Golden Scale, Great Venerable, "Why the hellish beings are acting out of character, we'll set aside for. Now, the top priority is to quell this upheaval. Golden Scale, Great Venerable, your western route must hold the line. Once we clear the eastern route of hellish beings, I will immediately lead my people to assist you." Excitement lit up in the Golden Scale Great Venerable's eyes. At last, a glimmer of hope. He nodded heavily and replied, "Good, we'll await your good news." The Iceheart Great Venerable put away her scale, instantly cutting off the communication, then flew down to Fang Chen's side and joined him in driving off the hellish beings. She suddenly asked, "You are not Wang Chengxiao, are you?" She then explained to herself, in recent times, the names Wang Chengxiao and Fang Chen had sprouted up like bamboo shoots, after rain across the various states. The difference was that those impersonating Wang Chengxiao mostly did shameful deeds under the cloak of darkness, thus not daring to show their true faces. In contrast, those claiming to be Fang Chen frequently performed righteous and noble deeds, and they took pride in calling themselves Fang Chen. She looked indifferently at the man before her. The Wang Cheng, see how you spoke of, is undoubtedly a false name. The question is, what shady deed are you about to do that you need to borrow the name of Wang Chengxiao? Upon hearing this, Fang Chen hastily shuffled to the side, deliberately keeping distance from this terrifying heavenly human Five Declines powerhouse, then respectfully replied, Enior, you are wise. This junior's true identity is the crown prince of the Western Sea Demon clan of Taking Great State. The Iceheart Great Venerable gave a slight nod, a hint of understanding in her eyes, and said softly, The Western Sea Crown Prince, is it? We owe you much for your assistance this time. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult to salvage the situation. Having said that, she gently flicked her sleeve. An ice butterfly, exuding a biting cold aura, gracefully flew out from her sleeve and landed steadily on Fang Chen's shoulder. She explained, This is a treasure I refined in my spare time. Once activated, it can protect you from the influence of domain power. This treasure can only be used 3 times, so make good use of it. Such a fine thing existed in this world. Fang Chen was overjoyed, hastily and carefully received it, and thanked her with tears of gratitude. Many thanks for Senior's bestowal. He paused, then couldn't resist asking further, Dare I ask, Senior, besides the Central Plains domains, can this treasure also withstand the Giant King's origin? Iceheart Great Venerable pondered for a moment before replying, I have not attempted it. Yet whether it is the domain of the Central Plains or the origin of the Giant King, in the end they are all manifestations of heaven and earth's power. Different paths, but the same destination. I suspect it should also work. When Fang Chen heard this, he treasured the artifact even more, unable to put it down. He still vividly remembered how the Giant King of Misfortune had placed bad luck upon him, leading to him barging in on Green Pearl, bathing in the past. The existence of the ice butterfly, at least, could shield them from being struck by some eerie, unknown origin power. Not far away, Donghua and the other powerhouses from the Taking Grand Continent listened with growing frowns, muttering inwardly. Though none of them had seen that Western Sea Crown Prince with their own eyes, they had some inkling of the situation in the Western Sea. The Western Sea had only one old Demon Emperor at the early stage of the Demon Emperor realm, barely holding things together. Where in the world did this late Nascent Soul, old monster come from? This was clearly hoodwinking Iceheart, Great Venerable. With that thought, Donghua felt a chill run down his spine and silently wiped a bead of cold sweat. Good heavens, just what divine being has popped out of nowhere, daring to blabber on with tall tales to a great venerable of the 5 decays? Is he not afraid of being exposed on the spot and ending with his body and soul annihilated? Just as everyone was restless with shock and doubt, the surging netherworld creatures ahead suddenly slowed down. They began pressing even more tightly together, as if in fear of something. Looking up, they saw that at the end of this underground realm stood a gargantuan mountain face gleaming with golden light. That was precisely the section of the Spirit Snake Mountain stretching deep into the earth. And upon this mountain body, a black fissure had torn open, over 1,000 zhengs wide and 100 zhengs tall. Boundless yin kai, like a flood bursting through a dam, madly poured forth from that rift. Countless netherworld creatures swarmed back into the fissure, which was why they had all crowded near the rift. Fang Chen fixed his eyes on the rift, slowly narrowing them, and spoke in a deep tone. So this is the so-called breach. The fissure's shape was utterly ferocious, as if it had been violently torn open by some colossal, heavens, bending claw. And he had once seen such a colossal claw once. It was none other than the demon claw of the Asura Saint Sun. Moreover, there should have been an immensely powerful world barrier between the interlayer world and the myriad demon Grand Continent. To tear through such a barrier and forcibly link the two realms, probably only a sage, or an even stronger existence, could achieve it. What are you looking at? Iceheart Great Venerable noticed Fang Chen had suddenly stopped dead, his expression frozen, and couldn't help but ask. Fang Chen's thoughts raced. Since he had finally managed to exchange words with a Great Venerable, the time had come to ask some of the questions buried deep in his heart. He clasped his hands respectfully and asked in a deep voice, Senior, may I ask, over the past 1,000 years, how many sages have been born in total? That Asura Saint Sun had only escaped from the underground world of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion 800 years ago. Therefore, his entry into the sage realm must have happened within this millennium. Iceheart Great Venerable revealed a look of surprise, baffled. Fang Chen was merely at the 8 aperture Nascent Soul stage. The sage realm should be something extremely distant for him. After a moment of silence, she nonetheless patiently answered, "From what I know, only 5. Fang Chen's heart trembled slightly. First, he was astonished at how incredibly difficult it was to step into the sage realm. In an entire 1,000 years, the Central Plains had given birth to great venerables of the 5 decays, if not 100, surely dozens. Yet among them, only a mere 5 had ultimately reached sagedom. The difficulty of achieving such nobility was evident. Second was his irrepressible excitement. News of the Asura Saint Sun finally had a clue. He suppressed the waves in his heart and continued pressing. "Senior, could you tell me which sages specifically?" Ice Heart Great Venerable grew more and more puzzled. She faintly sensed that this Wang Chengxie seemed to be searching for someone. She reigned in her confusion and slowly replied, "They are, respectively, the Myriad Cloud Sage, the Dragonflame Sage, the Heavenly Snare Sage, the Ancient Chan Buddha Lord, and the 9 Nether Demon Lord." Fang Chen secretly seethed with excitement. The Asura Saint Sun must be hiding among these 5. No, he turned the thought over. He had to first eliminate one. That was the Dragonflame Sage. If he recalled correctly, the master of the Little Tiger's family was none other than the former Dragonflame Venerable. Later, that senior had ascended and become the current Dragonflame Sage. This Dragonflame Sage had already existed as a divine transformation, venerable, of the human race 1,000 years ago. Thus, his suspicion could be directly eliminated. That left only the Myriad Cloud Sage, the Heavenly Snare Sage, the Ancient Chan Buddha Lord, and the 9 Nether Demon Lord. Judging by names alone, the latter 2 should be a sage of the Buddhist sect and a sage of the demon race, respectively. But that did not rule them out. Because Hua Xin had once said that the Asura Saint Sun came from the bloodthirsty Asura lineage. Their greatest prowess aside from bloodsucking was perfectly hiding their identity. So much so that even the ancient saints had never detected his existence. Therefore, no one could be certain whether he was disguised as a human or a demon, or even quite possibly played a trick of hiding in plain sight by entering the Buddhist sect for cultivation. For the first time, Fang Chen felt so close to the Asura Saint Sun. He hurriedly asked again, "Senior, have you heard of a great venerable of the 5 decays who seized the fortune of an entire land in the taking Grand Continent to step into sagedom?" Hearing this question, Ice Heart Great Venerable showed a trace of embarrassment, but still honestly replied, "Naturally, I know. To be frank, I once went to the taking Grand Continent myself, secretly observing the local fortune, to see if I could replicate that sage's path. But unfortunately, I was stopped by the Grand Libationer." Fang Chen felt a stir of bafflement. Ice Heart Great Venerable had also been to the taking Grand Continent. When in the world had that happened? But right now, that was not the question to be asking. A look of eager anticipation appeared in his eyes, and he asked next, "That Great Venerable, which of the sages you just mentioned is he?" Ice Heart Great Venerable shook her head. "How could I possibly know? Seizing fortune to enter sagedom is hardly an honorable affair, so that great sage would naturally go to great lengths to conceal his past. And that was already a matter from several centuries ago. Most of those who knew the truth back then have long since fallen. Those who still understand the inside story today are very few." Fang Chen felt a deep sense of regret. So close, he could have directly ferreted out that Asura Saint Sun. Still, today's harvest was definitely not small. At the very least, the target was now narrowed down to 4 individuals. After he returned to the taking Grand Continent, he would slowly inquire into the past circumstances of these 4 sage realm powerhouses and see if he could find any clues. Swoosh! Right at that moment, an invisible ripple surged out from the fissure without the slightest warning. It was formless, shadowless, and without a whisper of sound. Yet wherever it passed, those netherworld creatures crowding the rift entrance, whether countless nascent soul beings or the divine transformation once hidden among them, all were like Kisan sculptures swept by a fierce gale, disintegrating into drifting oblivion, reduced to nothingness. Ice Heart Great Venerable's face shifted slightly. With a sudden sweep of her sleeves, a gentle yet overwhelming force immediately wrapped everyone and sent them hurtling backward. On her exquisite face appeared an unprecedented gravity, as she intoned deeply, "It is a fluctuation of laws." The Grand Libationer is battling some terrifying existence inside the interlayer world. Seeing this, Fang Chen could not help but draw a sharp breath. He had always wondered why, with the Grand Libationer's supreme divine abilities, he had failed to seal off a single breach. So, a dire existence had already entrenched itself within the interlayer world. They retreated until they were at the edge of the sky. The sight that met their eyes made their scalps go numb. The sea-like, limitless horde of netherworld creatures had been wiped out by over half in that single strike. They all scattered and vanished like grains of sand, ending with not even bones remaining. This horrifying scene terrified those netherworld creatures that had narrowly survived. They no longer dared to go anywhere near the breach. Like birds startled by the twang of a bow, they reversed direction and came charging madly toward where Fang Chen and the others stood. Having finally driven them all the way here, all their efforts were now undone in a single stroke because of the law of fluctuation within the interlayer world. Fang Chen, faintly infuriated, gritted his teeth and said, "It must be that the terrifying existence inside sensed the netherworld creatures retreating, so it struck out violently." His gaze flickered. Taking advantage of the chaos, he quietly retrieved the Hell's Soul Bell and concealed it within his sleeve. Immediately, his voice burst forth like a spring thunderclap, shouting, "What are you all standing around for? Stop them quickly." The experts from the various provinces who had rushed over let out earth-shattering roars and charged forward with reckless abandon. Fang Chen noticed that the great Venerable Iceheart had also joined the fray. Seizing the cacophony of battle as cover, he discreetly shook the Hell's Soul Bell hidden in his sleeve. The moment the hellish beings heard the eerie ringing, they turned tail like a receding tide, fleeing in panicked desperation back toward the rift. This time, perhaps because the Grand Libationer had successfully entangled that terrifying entity, the other side ultimately failed to intervene again. The hellish beings swarmed into the rift in droves, a frenzied mass. In the time it took to drink half a cup of tea, the boundless horde of hellish beings had vanished completely. Only then could the hellish beings on the eastern route be considered thoroughly cleared. Jiang Wuya let out a long sigh of relief, his face showing a few traces of post-calamity solace. He marveled, "I can scarcely believe we actually drove back such an endless swarm of hellish beings." Expressions of relief also surfaced on the faces of the experts from the various provinces. Many of them had mentally prepared themselves to fall in battle even before arriving. No one expected it to end so surprisingly smoothly. Aside from the unfortunate fall of a single ferry at the start, the reinforcements from every province suffered no further casualties. This was nothing short of a miracle. Revered One Red Dust glanced down at her empty, severed sleeve, a trace of dazed disbelief flickering in her eyes. This outcome was truly something she had never anticipated. Lost in thought, her gaze involuntarily drifted toward the young, exquisitely beautiful Great Venerable Iceheart, her eyes brimming with deep envy and reverence. She respectfully performed a deep bow. "It is all thanks to your blessings, Senior, that we reinforcements from the various provinces were able to achieve such monumental merit. We beg you, Senior, to accept our collective salute." In her mind, the only one here capable of compelling the hellish beings to turn and flee was this unfathomably mighty Great Venerable. Upon hearing this, everyone forcibly roused their spirits, turning one after another, ready to offer a solemn bow to the Great Venerable Iceheart. After all, their achievements this time were substantial. They could exchange them for plenty of precious resources back at Spirit Snake Mountain. No matter what, they should properly express their gratitude to the Great Venerable Iceheart. Unexpectedly, the Great Venerable Iceheart merely cast a meaningful glance at Fang Chen's bulging sleeve before speaking indifferently. "No need to thank me. Fortune favors the worthy. This great victory actually has very little to do with me." She paused briefly, then shifted her tone. "Wang Chengxi outperformed especially well in this battle. Let him say a few words to all of you." Right now, everyone was utterly drained, weary beyond measure. They indeed needed someone to lift their spirits, to help them muster the energy to immediately head to the western route and support the demon army led by the Great Venerable Golden Scale. Hearing this, all eyes swiveled toward Fang Chen in unison. They were deeply impressed by this expert from Taking Great Province, who had been the most relentless in pursuing the hellish beings. Not only did he possess a wide array of techniques, but the power he unleashed was extraordinarily immense. The number of hellish beings he had slain was likely no less than that of several deity transformation realm cultivators. While adjusting their conditions, they watched Fang Chen, somewhat curious about what reflections he might offer. Suddenly called upon, Fang Chen was taken aback. What was there to say? Just roll up your sleeves and get to it. Gazing at everyone's battered state, he saw a fleeting vision of the coming war of two realms not far off. That battle would be far more brutal than this one. With that thought, his expression turned solemn. He cupped his hands in a formal salute toward the crowd, his voice low and deep. fellow Taoists of the various provinces, today marks our first and last time joining forces against an external foe. The unexpected opening made everyone pause momentarily. Clearly, they all understood Fang Chen's implication. Their hands slowed, and they listened in silence. Fang Chen continued, "Before long, many of us will fall on the battlefield. Mountains and rivers may meet again, but we may never have another chance to see one another. Today, we share armor as comrades. Tomorrow, we may share the Yellow Springs. That is the future written for us." The crowd grew even more subdued, an indescribable oppression weighing on their hearts. Indeed, among the 100+ experts gathered here today from all provinces, once the war against the ancient giants concludes, fewer than 1 in 10 will survive. They might all be annihilated. For a moment, a surge of sorrow welled up in everyone's hearts. But then, Fang Chen suddenly shifted his tone, his eyes blazing. "However, do not lose heart. Just as when we faced the beast tide of hellish beings and despaired, yet a turning point arrived in the end. So it will be in the war against the ancient giants. Our forebears never feared. They fought to the death, their bodies standing undefeated for 1,000 years. Even when outmatched, they chose to perish together with the enemy. What do we, 1,000 years later, have to fear?" A sense of humanity's sacred mission flooded their hearts. Though exhausted, their blood began to boil. Donghua gripped his sword case, his eyes sharp as blades. Since ancient times, evil has never triumphed over good. Our central plains have endured through countless eras without perishing. That is the clear mandate of heaven. In the end, victory will still be ours. Revered One Red Dust let out a chuckle. "If we truly can't win, then we'll just follow our ancestors' example and take the giants down with us. This old lady's delicate little body can't withstand being crushed by those giants anyway." The crowd rallied with renewed vigor. "That's right, the ancient giants are not invincible." Fang Chen of Taikang Great Province killed a giant king with his own hands. "Your news is outdated. He recently took down another giant king in Taikang. Counting it all up, he's also slain 4 giant kings on the heavenly mountain battlefield. When it comes to killing giant kings, fellow Taoist Fang Chen is a true professional. I'd name him the Central Plains top giant king, slaying specialist." Fang Chen felt the veins on his forehead twitch. Why did something so damn glorious, coming from these bastards' mouths, make him want to punch someone? And wasn't this supposed to be about lifting morale? How did it end up shifting entirely onto him? He coughed dryly. "Everyone, no matter how great the difficulties you face, just remember, be strong." The crowd shook off their gloom, rallying with enthusiasm. Their disorganized shouts rose up. "Yes, we must be strong. Be strong, be strong, be strong. Strong, strong, strong. Rape, rape, rape." Fang Chen nodded in satisfaction, but the more he listened, the more something felt off. Was there a discordant note in that chanting? The experts from the other provinces also sensed something strange and gradually fell silent. Only the demonic cultivators from the Great Wilderness province continued, in perfect unison, shouting at the top of their lungs, "Rape, rape, 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 rape." PFFD. Fang Chen's eyes bulged wide, nearly spurting a mouthful of old blood. What the hell? Was the moral climate of the Great Wilderness province utterly beyond saving? Even the great Venerable Iceheart couldn't help but glare at the demonic cultivators, her almond-shaped eyes flicking with annoyance. "Let's go, move to the western route and support the demons." Not long after they departed, the young emperor arrived, driving a horde of hellish beings before him. Under his mighty lightning, base techniques, the hellish beings panicked and scrambled into the rift. In no time, they were completely cleared out. With his strength alone, he had swept the entire southern route clean. However, he was not particularly happy, because the eastern route had been cleared ahead of him. "Someone dares steal my thunder." The young emperor's expression darkened, his eyes glinting coldly. "They're courting death." On the other side, the great Venerable Golden Scale led the demon clans of Spirit Snake Mountain in a desperate defense. Demon Lord Soul Shadow, who had only recently joined their ranks, was already covered in multiple wounds. The most conspicuous was the half of his right hand that had been bitten off. He was furious and filled with regret. After watching Fang Chen reach the defensive line, he had planned to hide, wait for Fang Chen to fall, and then retrieve his heavenly Thunderstone. But the great Venerable Golden Scale had sensed his presence and summoned him from afar, ordering him to the western front. Though he belonged to the great Venerable Black Dragon's faction, he was alone. With the great Venerable Golden Scale personally summoning him, how could he dare refuse? He had no choice but to brace himself and come here. He had planned to muddle through, but the beast tide proved unprecedentedly fierce, even more massive than the outbreak 10 days ago. As a result, he was riddled with injuries. Now the defense line was on the verge of collapse, and the risk of death loomed at any moment. And the great Venerable Golden Scale had issued a death order to hold the line, forbidding any retreat. It seemed he might very well meet his end here today. The more he thought about it, the deeper his regret festered. Had I foreseen this, I would never have ventured underground. The only consolation was that if the Western Front was this perilous, how much better could the Eastern Front, where Fang Chen was, be? He must be dead by now, right? I just wonder whether the heavenly thunder stone on him was scattered on the spot or swallowed by a hell spawn. Just then, a piercing gale suddenly howled from the sky. A beautiful, youthful female figure silently appeared in the air above. Along with her came over 100 powerhouses from various states. Soul Shadow Demon Lord was stunned. Iceheart Venerable, reinforcements from the various states. Why have they come here? Then what nearly made his eyes pop out was that standing beside Iceheart Venerable was a lively middle-aged man. Who else could it be but Wang Chun Xiao? He actually isn't dead. Golden Scale Venerable was overjoyed and laughed heartily. Ha ha ha, you are finally here. Iceheart Venerable said little, only giving a decisive, soft shout. Everyone, please exert yourselves a bit more. Hearing this, the powerhouses from the various states swiftly joined the demon race's defensive line. Their arrival greatly bolstered the defenses. The demon race's line, which had been steadily retreating, immediately launched a counterattack. However, the Hell Spawn's counterassault was equally fierce. In the fierce battle, some were immediately gravely wounded, nearly falling. Fang Chen did not hesitate, resolutely shaking the Hell Soul bell hidden in his sleeve. Just like on the Eastern Front, under the continuous ringing, the Hell Spawns turned tail and fled. Golden Scale Venerable was astonished, his gaze falling on Fang Chen with surprise and suspicion. Obviously, as a being at the 5 decays of the celestial stage, he too had detected the source of the sound. Iceheart Venerable, who is this? Golden Scale Venerable sent a shocked telepathic message. He also realized that this person's secret could not be recklessly exposed, so he did not make it public. Iceheart Venerable nodded slightly and said, "The Crown Prince of the Western Sea of Taking Great State." Golden Scale Venerable was amazed. What has happened to Taking Great State lately? One astounding figure after another emerges. First, a prodigious youth like Fang Chen, and now a strange genius who can command hell spawns. Iceheart Venerable gazed at the fleeing hell spawns and said, "Remember to record him a great merit later." Golden Scale Venerable looked at Fang Chen with deep gratitude. How can a mere great merit be enough? Without his intervention, my myriad demon's great state could have faced annihilation. Even a heaven-level merit would not be excessive. He resolved to reward this person handsomely. However, his expression soon soured slightly, because he saw Soul Shadow Demon Lord catching up to Fang Chen, who was chasing down the hell spawns. The two chatted freely, seeming to be quite familiar with each other. He did not get along very well with Black Dragon Venerable. Could this Western Sea Crown Prince be Black Dragon Venerable's man? At this thought, he couldn't help but feel resentment. Amid the beast tide, Soul Shadow Demon Lord said with surprise, "Wang Chun Xiao, you are actually unharmed." Fang Chen sneered inwardly. This fellow, covered in wounds, still hoped he was dead. The corner of his mouth curled into a mocking arc, and he retorted, "Senior, do you really wish something bad had happened to me?" Soul Shadow Demon Lord finally collected himself and hastily stiffened his face. "How could that be? I was worried about you." Fang Chen smiled but said nothing, quietly watching Soul Shadow Demon Lord put on an act. Soul Shadow Demon Lord watched the Hellspawns fleeing in disarray, his thoughts racing. The Hellspawns are only concerned with running now and don't harm anyone. How can I kill Fang Chen right under everyone's noses? Seeing Soul Shadow Demon Lord remain silent for so long, Fang Chen already guessed most of his secret scheming. At this critical juncture, this old demon still harbored wicked intentions. In that case, do not blame Fang Chen for being ruthless. He flipped his palm, producing a piece of ice crystal that radiated a chilling cold. Sealed within the ice crystal was an item, the fortune reversing lock he had not used in a long time. Fang Chen stepped forward calmly, his face full of sincerity. "Senior, just now I rendered some meritorious service. An Iceheart Venerable specially rewarded me with a treasure. Could you help this junior see what exactly it is?" "A reward from the Venerable. Soul Shadow, Demon Lord's spirits suddenly perked up. What Ice Heart Venerable bestows, how could it be an ordinary thing? He cast a sidelong glance, a sharp glint flashing in his eyes. At a single glance, Soul Shadow Demon Lord could tell the extraordinary nature of that heart-shaped bronze lock. It was clearly a high-grade spiritual artifact. What kind of service had this brat rendered that the Venerable would casually bestow such a treasure? For a moment, even he could not help but feel jealousy and resentment. Soul Shadow Demon Lord looked at Fang Chen, who foolishly handed over the magical treasure, his eyes turning slightly as he reached out and took the ice block. He brought the ice block close to his eyes to examine it carefully, then shook his head with feigned bewilderment. Let me take a closer look. This thing seems quite ordinary. It probably won't be of much use to you. Fang Chen furrowed his brows slightly, his face puzzled. How can that be? Could Ice Heart Venerable really reward something so common? Soul Shadow Demon Lord immediately stiffened his face, putting on an expression of being concerned for your welfare, and said sternly, We are both under Black Dragon Venerable. Would I deceive you? Ice Heart Venerable is an outsider after all. Even if you rendered meritorious service, she wouldn't be willing to reward you with a real treasure. I can't bear to see this, so let me reward you on behalf of Black Dragon Venerable. As he spoke, he reached out and took out a jade box. Inside the jade box lay a crystal as black as ink, emitting a heart, stopping astonishing pressure. Soul Shadow Demon Lord pointed to the crystal and slowly introduced it. This item was obtained from a deity transformation, Realm Hell, spawn 10 days ago during the outbreak. Black Dragon Venerable personally stated that this black crystal originates from the Hell Realm, a rare treasure for refining yin attribute spirit pills, magical treasures, and even in cultivating yin attribute arts. Take it back to take in great state and sell it to the evil crow reverend of the great yin sect, and you will surely be able to trade it for a genuine treasure. Fang Chen sneered inwardly. He had thought this old demon could produce something decent, but instead he fobbed him off with such a tiny piece of trash. However, his original intention was not really to demand any treasure. Since the other party was willing to give it, he might as well pretend to be pleased and accept everything. Fang Chen immediately showed a face full of gratitude, extending both hands to receive the jade box. Many thanks for Senior's generous gift. However, the moment his fingertips touched the jade box, his expression changed imperceptibly. Because he distinctly sensed that the Saint Crystal mold within his heavenly thunderstone actually had an unusual reaction at that moment. The Saint Crystal mold was a supreme divine object capable of reversing an ancient giant, turning it back to its initial form. What exactly was the origin of this utterly unremarkable black crystal before him? He forcibly suppressed the tempest in his heart, calmly tucked the jade box into his heavenly thunderstone, then looked back at the ice sealing the fortune reversing lock and said, Then, Senior, shouldn't you return this item to this junior? Soul Shadow Demon Lord's lips curled into a contemptuous arc. You took my black crystal, and you still want to get back this high-grade spiritual artifact. He straightened his face and said righteously, Since you've already received the reward of the black crystal, this rather useless trinket should be given to some other demon. You can't hog 2 rewards all by yourself, right? Fang Chen looked longingly at the fortune reversing lock and could only reluctantly nod and sigh. All right, then let it be as Senior says. Though he spoke aggrievedly, his heart had already sneered out loud. His pair of eyes secretly roamed, beginning to search the battlefield for the figures of deity transformation realm hell spawns. So you want to court death? Then I'll grant your wish. However, perhaps because the 2 venerables personally oversaw the front, those deity transformation realm hell spawns had all fled without a trace. It wasn't until everyone chased to the vicinity of the spatial rift that they saw a group of hell spawns crowding at the breach. Among them was unmistakably one deity transformation realm entity radiating a monstrous aura. Fang Chen's eyes immediately lit up. Soul Shadow, Demon Lord, also noticed the golden opportunity. If he didn't act now to send Fang Chen to his death, it would soon be too late. If he failed, not only would he fail to fulfill Black Dragon Venerable's orders, but the drop of venom he had long coveted would also be lost forever. Soul Shadow Demon Lord turned his gaze, sidled up to Fang Chen, and lowered his voice, urging, Wang Chunk Xiao, look, the hellspawns are about to all leave. If we don't exert ourselves to the utmost now, the credit will slip away. Come, I'll lead you to find a powerful one. Together, you and I will slay it. Fang Chen had the very same intention, so he immediately complied and responded loudly, We shall rely on Senior. This junior was just thinking about earning more merits to bring glory to our Lord. Soul Shadow, Demon Lord, sneered inwardly. Truly foolish beyond cure. He grabbed Fang Chen, his figure blurring, and instantly flashed into the air above that divine transformation stage hell creature. A fierce gleam flashed in his eyes, and he let out a low shout, "You'd better be careful." Before his words had finished, the two of them appeared directly in front of that hell creature. Seeing humans and demons joining forces to pursue and attack, the hell creature let out a thunderous roar without a second word. Its huge mouth opened, and a surging, ferocious crimson beam of light spurted out, instantly engulfing their figures completely. The corner of Soul Shadow Demon Monarch's mouth hooked into an icy arc of extreme coldness. Farewell, Wang Chengxiao. With just a slight thought, he teleported far away, leaving Fang Chen alone to forcibly endure this certain kill strike. But who could have known, just at the instant the crimson beam was about to swallow Fang Chen? That divine transformation stage hell creature, without any warning, exploded violently from inside out. Amidst the flying flesh and blood, a figure brimming with flashing lightning, as radiant as the blazing sun of the ninth heaven, stood proudly in the void. It was the young emperor. The young emperor, with a cold expression, looked down and thundered in front of this seat, "You dare to be reckless." Soul Shadow Demon Monarch, full of glee, had been waiting to see Fang Chen die and his Tao vanish, but unexpectedly the young emperor suddenly appeared to spoil things. This fellow's actions were simply too overbearing. The hell creature was provoked and merely acted in self-defense. How could it be sentenced to death without distinguishing right from wrong? At worst, according to the rules of Fang Lake, it should at least be judged as mutual brawling and expelled, right? Soul Shadow Demon Monarch was so furious he slapped his thigh, utterly irritated. Just when Fang Chen should have been a corpse, the young emperor had to go crazy at the worst moment. What a pity there will never be another chance. Ice Heart Sovereign, Golden Scale Sovereign, and the other strong experts all arrived. Working together, they slaughtered the remaining hell creatures without exception. Golden Scale Sovereign could hardly conceal his excitement, cupping his fists and loudly proclaiming to all, "Thanks to everyone's full assistance, the crisis of my 10,000 Mon Great Province has finally been resolved. After the Grand Libationer seals the spatial rift, this sovereign shall reward based on merit, with no breach of promise." Upon hearing this, everyone's eyes lit up in unison. The rewards promised by Spirit Snake Mountain were already exceptionally generous. This time, there was also a mysterious person aiding in the shadows, suppressing the hell creatures. Thus, each of them had bountiful kills, far exceeding expectations. When the rewards are distributed later, they will surely be astonishing. Of course, not everyone cared about this. The young emperor, like a monarch surveying his realm, looked down upon everyone with an extremely indifferent tone. He coldly asked who is controlling the hell creatures. Those two bone-chilling gazes slowly roamed among the experts of the various provinces. The reason the hell creatures on the west route turned and fled was entirely because Iceheart Sovereign had arrived in time with his people. Therefore, the mysterious person controlling the hell creatures must be hiding among the crowd, led by Iceheart Sovereign. Sensing something amiss, Iceheart Sovereign frowned and asked, "What do you intend to do?" The young emperor clasped his hands behind his back and arrogantly declared, "I will not permit anyone to steal my limelight." "Who is controlling the hell creatures? Step forward before this seat." Upon hearing this, the experts from all provinces felt a chill in their hearts. In terms of overbearingness in the entire Middle Continent, if the young emperor claimed to be second, none would dare claim first. Just because someone cleared a path of hell creatures faster than him, he would come looking for trouble. What kind of bullshit reasoning is this? Experts from other provinces were furious, but dared not speak out. Several experts from Tian province, however, had grim expressions and quietly retreated behind others. They knew far too well the young emperor's character. This man acted always on his whims, utterly unreasonable, and would never give up until his goal was achieved. Fang Chen couldn't help but furrow his brows tightly. The young emperor wanting to kill him for the void-flowing lightning force was somewhat understandable. Now, over such a trivial matter of vying for limelight, he intended to move against him. No wonder that earlier, the commandant had repeatedly urged him to stay far away from the young emperor. This fellow truly was overbearing and insane. Iceheart Sovereign calmly shielded the crowd and said in a deep voice, "The Grand Libationer is present here. Please be prudent in word and deed." Golden Scale Sovereign also flashed to the front of the experts, his demonic aura erupting violently, and shouted in anger, "Young Emperor, don't act recklessly." Thanks to the support of these fellow Taoists from outside provinces, Fang Chen's 10,000 demon Great Province was spared a catastrophic disaster. As the host, how could Golden Scale Sovereign watch idly as the young emperor threatened everyone so unscrupulously? However, the young emperor ignored the two as if they did not exist. His two gazes, almost tangible, still swept slowly over the experts with overwhelming pressure. Those under his scanning all showed pained expressions, as if their bodies were being pierced alive by two invisible sharp blades, then torn apart inch by inch. Various hidden powers within their bodies uncontrollably leaked outward. Sovereigns at the divine transformation stage could barely withstand it. But for nascent soul cultivators under the young emperor's gaze, there was simply no secret left in their bodies. Whether the young emperor could identify the one controlling the hell creatures was still uncertain. But he would definitely find out the void-flowing lightning force within his own body. Ever since the heavenly secret elder sent someone from young Emperor Mountain to deliver a message warning him not to seek trouble with Fang Chen again, Fang Chen had once thought that this young master had given up. But after witnessing the young emperor's overbearingness and arrogance firsthand, he no longer believed that this person was one to heed advice. If he truly discovered the void-flowing lightning force in his body, the young emperor would undoubtedly strike to kill on the spot. Even with both Iceheart Sovereign and Golden Scale Sovereign protecting him, he would never let the matter rest. Seeing the young emperor's sharp gaze rapidly approaching, about to sweep over the team from taking Great Province, Fang Chen's heart rapidly sank along with it. In his mind, several countermeasures flashed by in an instant, such as exposing the chaos, ancient blood, Marquia's mark, or using that drop of venom from the Black Dragon, Sovereign, or directly intimidating with that bronze hell, savage beast vessel. However, as soon as the ideas arose, he extinguished them one by one. Because what he was facing now was not the first decay of the heavenly man, nor the second decay, but a supreme ruler capable of dominating a great province's territory, a true heavenly man's 5 decays. Any scheme before absolute strength is as fragile as a bubble, unable to withstand even a casual strike. The only chance of survival was that the fate-shifting lock was still on Soul Shadow Demon Monarch. He would block this fatal calamity for him. At that moment, Donghua, standing quietly beside Fang Chen, suddenly let out a muffled groan. As the young emperor's icy gaze passed over him, it caused the divine halo behind his head to tremble uncontrollably. A domain, silently blooming, instantly enveloped the surroundings. In a trance, everyone seemed to see a massive scale. On one side of the scale was a heart brimming with noble righteousness, and on the other side, vividly, were their own hearts. If the heart was bright and pure, the scale remained perfectly balanced. If the heart was dark, the scale would tilt mercilessly, ultimately causing them to kill themselves uncontrollably. Even the young emperor's gaze slightly froze. He couldn't help but take an extra look at the domain and said lightly, measuring good and evil, "Ha, drawing a prison on the ground." This kind of domain only produced an effect on those who were utterly wicked and evil. Against those with pure hearts, it had no influence at all. This meant that once Donghua's opponent was not a great evil doer, his domain would be of no use. In a life or death fight, that would be a fatal disadvantage. Donghua slowly retracted his domain, his expression calm as he said, "If I can uphold the righteous path of the world, what regret is there in drawing a prison on the ground?" He looked straight at the young emperor and said frankly, "Young emperor, it is not too late to do more good deeds and commit fewer evil acts." The heartstrings of the experts from all provinces quivered. Donghua actually dared to instruct the young emperor to his face. Given the young emperor's capricious nature, he couldn't even tolerate someone driving away hell creatures before him. How much more so such direct criticism? Iceheart Sovereign and Golden Scale Sovereign's expressions instantly tightened. From their understanding of the young emperor at that moment, he likely already had killing intent. However, what surprised the two sovereigns was the young emperor merely chuckled lightly and said with an extremely indifferent voice, "This seat's actions are not for you to comment on." As his words fell under everyone's astonished gazes, he actually shifted his sight from Donghua and slowly swept toward Fang Chen beside him. Fang Chen's heart sank, and he sighed inwardly. "It's over. It's going to be exposed after all. I can only fight to the death." But just at the instant the young emperor's blade, sharp gaze, was about to pierce Fang Chen's body. From the thousand, Jiang, wide rift, an even more majestic fluctuation of laws, erupted and radiated outward. Wherever it passed, the very fabric of space was crinkled like the withered skin of an aged man, collapsing into dense, overlapping folds. Space near the rift was violently torn apart, revealing vast expanses of void. Chaotic spatial forces erupted wildly from that void, scattering in all directions. Caught off guard, the crowd was instantly seized by this spatial force and hurled in every direction. Those with better luck were merely pushed far away, landing beyond the zone of spatial devastation. Those less fortunate were directly swept into the spatial folds, viciously trapped like filling in a dumpling. But that was merely bad luck. There were those struck with even greater calamity. A mixed group of humans and demon clans was actually swept up by a colossal chaotic spatial force and flung directly into that terrifying fissure. Within that fissure lay the interstitial world. That was the domain where infernal creatures roamed unchecked. Worse yet, it was inhabited by a dreadful sage realm being. Falling in there, the chance of survival was infinitesimal. At the edge of the shattered space, Fang Chen was hurled out by a tremendous force. He staggered a few steps in the air, nearly tumbling headfirst. Looking around in panic, he found himself on a safe patch of ground, his face flushed with excitement. Heavens above, you've finally opened your eyes. According to past experience, such sudden peril had never skipped him before. Now that heaven had favored him so, letting him be a lucky one, it felt unreal. Without a second thought, he steadied himself and prepared to use Cloud Shadow escape to flee. But what nearly made him cough up blood was, just as he was about to move, another invisible force of law radiated out. And this force of law was coming straight for him, Fang Chen. An invisible hand of law viciously seized him. In the next instant, he vanished from his spot into thin air. After a violent spin of heaven and earth, Fang Chen steadied himself and looked around. His expression instantly darkened. This place was dim and lightless, with yin energy surging to the skies. In the distance, a large horde of infernal creatures could be faintly heard roaring and charging madly towards him. If not the interstitial world, where else could it be? I knew it would be like this. Fang Chen let out a long sigh. How could such a good thing as hitting the jackpot ever be his turn? Sensing the swiftly approaching beast tide, he dared not linger. If there happened to be a spirit transformation stage, infernal creature among them, that would truly be something. He closed his eyes and sensed briefly, noticing that the yin energy was flowing northward. There, he thought, must be the breach through which yin energy was escaping. Just as he was about to withdraw, Fang Chen suddenly felt something. A golden leaf slowly levitated from his chest, pointing far off towards the direction the infernal creatures were surging from. Fang Chen was startled. Isn't this the golden leaf given to me by the oblivious wild elder? He once said his disciple would come to this place too, and asked me to look out for her. Looking at the direction the leaf pointed, he was speechless. So that fellow was also a luckless soul, having been swept into the interstitial world as well. Sure enough, amidst the heavy stampede of infernal creatures, he vaguely heard an indignant curse. Ah, damned bastard, you dragged me into this too. Fang Chen looked down at the golden leaf on his chest, and a thought suddenly sprang to mind. Could it be that the oblivious wild elder's disciple was randomly teleported by the spatial force? And because the two of them had this pair of gold and silver leaves that resonated, she was implicated and dragged in as well. So misfortune could even be transmitted to others. Seeing that she was being hunted relentlessly by infernal creatures, Fang Chen rushed forward without hesitation. Even without the elder's request for him to look after her, she had fallen into the interstitial world because of him. How could he stand by and watch? There was a sharp swish of rapid flight as Fang Chen appeared in the sky above the horde of infernal creatures. Looking down, he saw a full 100 of those creatures madly chasing a young girl of about 18 or 19. The girl was dressed in coarse linen, a dirty ponytail tied behind her head, and her face was covered in pustules. Worse still, her eyes were a pair of crossed eyes. Fang Chen's mouth twitched violently. He thought to himself, so this is the oblivious wild elder's female disciple. That old man had the nerve to try and matchmake them. Seeing that several Nascent Soul stage later, Faye's infernal creatures were already brewing dangerous red light in their mouths, he did not dare hesitate. Fang Chen decisively took out the infernal soul bell and shook it forcefully. The infernal creatures that had been charging in pursuit suddenly halted in their tracks. As the bell's chime echoed on, they lowered their heads one by one, trembling all over, and fled in all directions. The ugly girl was finally out of danger. Gasping for breath, she plopped down on a jet-black stone. But unexpectedly, the stones of the interstitial world were exceptionally freezing. The chill shot up instantly, making her shiver all over and jump up as if stung by needles. Both angry and annoyed, she glared fiercely up at Fang Chen in the sky with her crossed eyes, not saying a word. But in her heart, she was already complaining. This was the good man her master had spoken of. Looking at Fang Chen's middle-aged face, she sneered inwardly. If my master wanted to marry me off, to get me far away, he could just say so. Why go through the trouble of arranging this middle-aged man for a matchmaking? The only thing about this fellow that could compare with Fang Chen was probably his origin from taking Grand Prefecture. Though, of course, that was according to his own claim. This young girl was none other than you, Mingzhu. In order to avoid being noticed by the good man her master had arranged, she had paid a considerable price to disguise herself like this. She scrutinized Fang Chen from head to toe, her eyes rolling slyly, and asked, "You're not from taking Grand Prefecture, are you?" Though she disliked this middle-aged man, she had to admit his strength was unfathomable. Earlier, while hunting infernal creatures, this man had charged at the forefront, his strength not one bit inferior to that of Donghua, the spirit transformation Venerable. She had never heard of such a figure from taking Grand Prefecture. Thus, she strongly suspected this man was pretending to be someone he was not. Naturally, Fang Chen did not bother to explain, and simply flew down to land in front of her. Seeing the gold and silver leaves floating before their chests, he could hardly pretend not to notice. He had no choice but to grit his teeth and say, "The oblivious wild elder must have mentioned me to you, lady." But allow me to make it clear. I already have a Dao companion, and have absolutely no intention of partnering with another. I hope you won't pester me, fairy. I pester you. Yu Mingzhu was so angry she could laugh. She thought to herself, this guy is unbelievably hypocritical. If he didn't want to accept my master's matchmaking, then why did he accept the golden leaf? Did he think my master would force him? Clearly, he changed his mind after seeing my ugly appearance. If I had shown my true face, I'm afraid he would have had a completely different attitude. Without hiding the disdain on her face, she said coldly, "What a coincidence. I don't wish to be pestered by you either." Hearing this, Fang Chen breathed a slight sigh of relief and smiled. Nothing could be better. He could finally report back to the oblivious wild elder. But he didn't know if, after such a long time, the elder had found Yu Mingzhu. Just then, boom! A heaven-shaking, earth-shattering roar suddenly echoed from the center of the interstitial world. It seemed that some supremely powerful beings were fiercely clashing. Fang Chen's expression sharpened. He said in a deep voice, "Let's go. I'll get you out of the interstitial world." Yu Mingzhu's heart also skipped a beat. This place was a supreme danger zone. They had to leave immediately. But she didn't trust Fang Chen to lead the way. Though Fang Chen's strength was great, in this mysterious and unpredictable interstitial world, it might not be enough. It was safest to trust herself. A flash of colorful light swept through her eyes as she activated her signature technique, the Son of Heaven's Kai observation technique, to observe the flow of destiny between heaven and earth and discern fortune and misfortune. According to her experience, wherever the flow of destiny was strong, it usually meant safety. After looking around, her gaze finally fixed on the direction behind her, but she couldn't help furrowing her brows and muttering, "Strange. The battle area's destiny blazes like the midday sun, impossible to look at directly." She paused, then continued, "The direction of the rift, on the other hand, is shrouded in darkness, with peril lurking." After a brief deliberation, she glanced coldly at Fang Chen and said with an icy tone, "Follow me if you don't want to die." Before her voice even faded, she stepped forward and shot towards the battle zone. Fang Chen's expression changed dramatically. He shouted urgently, "Are you insane?" But the other party did not look back, even impatiently employing spatial secret arts to speed away. Fang Chen couldn't help clicking his tongue and muttering, "This lass, why is she so disobedient?" He had originally thought to just leave, but recalling the old hermit of the Wields' entrustment, he could only grit his teeth and quickly chase after her. First, try to persuade her. If she really won't listen, then knock her unconscious and take her by force. Soon after, Fang Chen caught up with the ugly maiden. This place is somewhere within the interlayer world. The yin energy is oppressive in all directions. Even with Fang Chen's cultivation at the late Nascent Soul stage, he felt a chill all over his body. Meanwhile, the ugly maiden was sprawled on a steep little earthen slope, stealthily peering through a crevice to observe ahead. Fang Chen, without any carelessness, also quietly crawled over on his belly. Looking in the direction the ugly maiden was facing, his expression couldn't help but change slightly. On the other side of the little earthen slope, there was actually a sunken black valley. The valley was filled with thick black viscous liquid, steaming out great amounts of water vapor that condensed into dense, heavy dark clouds above the valley. These dark clouds spread outward in all directions, and wherever they passed, they descended strands of chilling yin energy that made the heart palpitate. Fang Chen showed shock, thinking to himself, could this entire valley be liquefied yin energy? Could this place be the source of yin energy for the entire interlayer world? He had an extremely bad premonition. This kind of place is absolutely the core area of the interlayer world. There must be supreme beings guarding it. The two of them, mere cultivators at the Nascent Soul stage, coming here is simply seeking death. But to his surprise, this extremely thick yin energy pool was not completely lifeless. In the pool, there actually grew a black lotus the size of a wash basin. From its 9 seed holes, eerie pitch-black flames were burning. Vaguely, one could see that 8 of the seed holes were already empty. Only 1 seed hole remained, still nurturing a lotus seed so black it shone. What is that? Fang Chen concentrated secretly, pondering. To be able to grow at the source of yin energy in the interlayer world, this is undoubtedly a peerless supreme treasure. It's just unknown whether it is also useful to creatures of the Middle Earth realm. Meanwhile, Yu Mingju at the side had already watched with shining eyes, her face unable to suppress excitement. She lowered her voice and said excitedly, "This is the Calamity-Dispelling Black Lotus of the Hell Realm. Not only does it have miraculous effects for Hell beings to break through realms, its effect second only to the Hell Abyss Crystal. It also has heaven, defying effects for beings of the Middle Earth realm to break through realms. Just 1 lotus seed can allow a strong cultivator trapped in the 4 declines of heaven and man to break through shackles and leap to become a supreme being of the mortal world."
What?
It can let one break through to the 5 declines of heaven and man. Doesn't this mean that one can artificially create a great venerable realm existence? The ancient giants are about to descend. If the Middle Earth can thus give birth to a great venerable, that would be an immense blessing. Fang Chen's eyes showed eagerness, but he quickly narrowed his eyes and stared suspiciously at Yu Mingju. This lass, ugly on the outside, yet so scheming inside. Such a divine object, just knowing it herself is enough. Why did she deliberately say it in such detail? Isn't it just to stir up his greed and incite him to risk digging out that lotus seed together? Anyone could figure out with their toes that such a divine object would never be left lying around completely unguarded. There must be invisible, lethal danger lurking in the shadows. He said with a speechless face, "Are you scheming against me, as if I were an ancient giant?" Her little scheme seen through to her face. Yu Mingju was not annoyed. Her bright eyes rolled, and another plan formed. She proposed, "Then let's join hands to take this Calamity-Dispelling Black Lotus. After we get it, split the lotus seed in half, 1 for each." Yu Mingju thought to herself that once the Calamity-Dispelling Black Lotus was in hand, she had plenty of ways to snatch it whole. Fang Chen, however, after pondering a moment, slightly shook his head and said calmly, "I think it's better not to be greedy. In such a perilous environment with such a heaven-sent spirit object lying here, yet the hell beings all stay away from it. What does that mean? Do we even need to say?" Yu Mingju curled her little mouth slightly and said, "You are quite cautious." After speaking, she suddenly paused, stunned. She couldn't help turning her head and carefully sizing up Fang Chen. "What are you looking at me for?" Fang Chen asked, completely puzzled. Yu Mingju stroked her chin and said thoughtfully, "You're a bit like my man." Fang Chen felt both annoyed and amused. This girl already has a man, so why is the forgetful emotions old hermit trying to match them? He immediately put on a stern face and said, "That man of yours really isn't picky. He'll take anyone." Yu Mingju shrugged unconcernedly. "My man is far more outstanding than you imagine." As she spoke, she once again assessed the Calamity-Dispelling Black Lotus. After a brief thought, she decisively said, "Since we're not taking it, then let's wait." She actually also chose to decisively give up. Because Fang Chen's words indeed made sense. Such a heaven-defying divine object, if it were really so easy to take, why haven't the hell beings of this interlayer world come to take it? Among those beings, some are existences at the divine transformation realm. Even they don't dare act rashly, which fully shows the danger behind it. Wait for what? Fang Chen was bewildered. He found himself increasingly unable to understand this ugly maiden's series of actions. Wait for a chance to survive. Yu Mingju said calmly, Only this place is the safest. In her eyes, the Calamity-Dispelling Black Lotus before her was the mass of tremendous fortune she had seen. As long as she stayed near it, she would definitely be extremely safe. As she spoke, she took out a small stone engraved with pale golden runes and gently pressed it against her forehead. The runes instantly imprinted onto her forehead. Immediately after, she vanished from sight on the spot. Her aura and energy fluctuations also dissipated completely, not a single trace leaking out. Fang Chen was full of surprise. What a formidable invisibility art! Though she was right beside him, he had no perception of her at all. In terms of invisibility effect alone, it was much more powerful than the art of selfless purification he cultivated. Even early-stage divine transformation realm experts might not be able to detect her presence. Fang Chen couldn't help asking curiously, "That stone of yours, can you lend it to me for a moment?" Yu Mingzhu glanced at the constantly rotating golden leaf on his chest and bluntly refused. Dream on. Fang Chen could only curl his lip and say helplessly, "Fine, I'll just go invisible myself." Hearing this, Yu Mingzhu couldn't help frowning. What if the danger they encounter later is some incredibly powerful being? If Fang Chen's invisibility art isn't sophisticated enough and is seen through by the other party, it would inevitably implicate her as well. What a nuisance, she muttered softly, then reluctantly tossed the small stone beside him. Fang Chen quickly grabbed the stone and imitated her, pressing it against his own forehead. Instantly, a faint, profound fluctuation surged into his body. This kind of fluctuation he was not unfamiliar with. This is Sage Runes, words containing the power of laws. Fang Chen was secretly shocked. The forgetful emotions old hermit really doted on this disciple, gifting her such a precious thing to carry for her life. "Return it to me as soon as you're done." Seeing that Fang Chen had also entered invisibility, Yu Mingzhu immediately urged. Fang Chen responded with an "oh," and looking sideways, he realized he could actually see Yu Mingzhu, who was also in invisibility. He couldn't help exclaiming in amazement, "This thing is truly magical. In the same invisibility state created by the Sage Runes, we can actually see each other." Yu Mingzhu snatched the stone back, turned her back to him, and silently observed the movements of the Calamity-Dispelling Black Lotus. Fang Chen couldn't help but chuckle at the sight. This girl's temperament was truly unpredictable. He also lay down again and watched the Black Lotus together while asking in a low voice, "What exactly are you waiting for?" Sensing that Fang Chen's aura was very close, Yu Mingzhu, full of disgust, crawled aside a bit and said irritably, "Don't ask, just wait." Fang Chen felt quite helpless and could only patiently wait in silence. The Calamity-Dispelling Black Lotus remained motionless. But at that moment, Fang Chen suddenly narrowed his eyes and abruptly looked toward the opposite side of the valley. Relying on his mastery of the origin of wind, he faintly sensed a trace of anomalous air current fluctuation. Someone was coming. The reason they remained unseen was either that the other party's cultivation had reached the deity transformation stage, or that they too were hidden by invisibility. Yu Mingzhu seemed to detect the anomaly as well. She quietly wrote the 6 characters "Follow the Calamity," banishing Black Lotus on the ground, and showed them to Fang Chen. After Fang Chen read it, she immediately wiped it away, leaving not a trace behind. Fang Chen wore a contemplative expression, "Follow the Calamity, banishing Black Lotus." Just as he pondered, a ripple suddenly spread across the thick black water at the bottom of the valley. It was actually the Calamity, banishing Black Lotus itself, shaking violently, thus stirring the waters. Someone was attempting to dig up this Calamity, banishing Black Lotus. He quickly focused his gaze and held his breath, staring fixedly without blinking at the Black Lotus's every movement. The roots of the Calamity, banishing Black Lotus, seemed deeply embedded in some unknown substance. Even when that unseen powerhouse exerted bare-handed force, he could not budge it in the slightest. The standoff dragged on for a full 10 breaths. The figure grew visibly anxious. This was an extremely deep part of the interlayer world, where no delay could be tolerated. Left with no alternative, he fiercely unleashed the immense, majestic power of the deity transformation stage. As his power leaked out, the invisibility effect upon him naturally shattered, revealing his true form. He was unmistakably a hulking, bare-chested brute with crimson skin and bulging muscles. A high-grade spiritual weapon hammer strapped diagonally at his waist. At the back of his head, a divine ring condensed from a blazing flame mark blazed and pulsed. Fang Chen recognized that this must be a deity transformation venerable from Divine Armament Province. This person had also been swept into the interlayer world. After revealing his form, he held nothing back in his attack. The divine ring behind him vibrated violently, and he directly activated his own domain. He barked out in a fierce shout. Nothing can withstand it. The domain radiated in all directions, and Fang Chen and Yu Mingzhu were also enveloped within it. Fang Chen immediately felt his body turn limp and soft, unable to muster the least bit of strength. It wasn't just that his entire body lost strength, even his bones were rapidly softening. More bizarrely, the originally cold, solid ground beneath him also transformed into a mire, causing Fang Chen's body to sink continuously downward. The same happened to Yu Mingzhu. In a mere instant, almost half her body had sunk into the earth. That venerable seemed to sense something amiss, his eyes suddenly sweeping toward Fang Chen's position, his face a mixture of shock and anxiety. Not daring to hesitate another instant, he once more exerted his full power. Even though the bottom of the black water lay at the center of the domain and had been softened to the greatest extent, only after he mobilized all his deity transformation power did the Calamity, banishing Black Lotus, finally stir. A muffled, thunderous boom erupted from the bottom of the pool, as if some massive object had forcibly torn free, triggering violent tremors. The entire valley shook violently as cracks spread madly outward in all directions from the pool's center. More terrifyingly, the quake spread throughout the entire interlayer world, causing the entire world to shudder and crack, displaying signs of imminent collapse. Fang Chen's heart lurched and a thought surfaced. Could it be that this calamity, banishing Black Lotus, was not merely a spiritual plant? Why did uprooting it cause a disturbance akin to destroying the core eye of a grand formation? The deity transformation Venerable from Divine Armament Province was also taken aback. He had only inadvertently perceived this lotus's extraordinariness, and thus conceived the desire to harvest it. He never imagined it would trigger such horrifying tremors in the interlayer world. This meant the commotion here, absolutely, could not escape the notice of others. If other deity transformation venerables had also been drawn into this realm, they would instantly teleport here. He dared not delay a moment longer, pouring all his strength into a frenzied pull. With a sharp, tearing crunch as if a heavenly pillar had snapped, the calamity, banishing Black Lotus, was finally uprooted completely. And this at last triggered an even more terrifying cataclysm. The entire valley collapsed on the spot. The horrifying earthquake made the earth heave and roll like billowing waves, as if countless gargantuan beasts deep underground were churning frantically. Even the spatial barriers of the interlayer world shuddered violently at this moment. Space was distorted into layer after layer of folds, exactly as during the previous battle of the sages. In an instant, the interlayer world saw heaven crumble and earth sink. Fang Chen felt a chill inwardly. He had to leave immediately. The tremors in the interlayer world showed no sign of weakening. Instead, they grew increasingly intense. If the spatial barrier were breached and connected to the endless void realm, then things would truly become interesting. All living creatures in this world would be exiled into the void, just like the Nascent Soul cave dwelling at the bottom of the snowy cliff in Taking Great Prefecture. By now, the deity transformation Venerable from Divine Armament Province had already pulled out the calamity, banishing Black Lotus. He gave it a cursory scan. Beneath the roots was a large, dusty, elongated swelling mass. Astonishingly, a section of giant lotus root, as tall as a man. It was precisely due to the existence of this giant root that the Black Lotus could not be easily pulled out. The Venerable had no time to study it closely. He casually tossed it into a spatial storage artifact, then turned his gaze toward the direction where Fang Chen and his companion lay concealed. His eyes narrowed slightly, a trace of ruthlessness silently flowing within them. Fang Chen's expression changed drastically, inwardly cursing. This fellow intended to silence them by death. Possessing such a heaven-defying divine object, if word leaked, it would likely invite fatal calamity. For safety's sake, killing all witnesses was naturally the best course. Although he could not see Fang Chen and his companion, their accidental sinking into the earth earlier had already revealed their approximate location. He only had to strike at this area to effortlessly suppress and kill them both. Fang Chen's heart hammered. He decisively grabbed Yu Mingzhu's arm and executed a spatial teleportation to flee the spot. The two had barely escaped. The ground where they had been prone moments before suddenly transformed into a mire. Beneath the mire, a fist brimming with destructive power viciously punched upward. Immediately after, the mud coalesced, remarkably taking the form of that deity transformation, Venerable. Meanwhile, the Venerable standing beside the black pool collapsed on the spot into a puddle of mud and dispersed. This person's domain could not only soften all things, but could also soften himself and fuse with everything. The world has always held a stereotype about deity transformation venerables who entered the Tao through alchemy or artifact refining. They believed that while such venerables' support abilities were strong, their combat strength was weak. Yet this venerable from Divine Armament Province, much like Vice Palace Master Yu, completely overturned Fang Chen's understanding. Their battle prowess was not the slightest bit inferior to that of venerables who entered the Tao through spell cultivation. The deity transformation venerable from Divine Armament Province, his face dark, coldly spat out, Yu dodged quite quickly. Yu Mingzhu's heart clenched in alarm. Subconsciously, she moved to mobilize Nascent Soul power and activate her magic treasure to confront the enemy. But before her spiritual power could surge forth, it was steadily suppressed by a stream of Nascent Soul power transmitted from Fang Chen's palm. He slightly shook his head at Yu Mingzhu, signaling her not to act rashly. This person was trying to trick them into striking, thereby revealing their position. Yu Mingzhu then calmed down. Protected by the sage inscribed characters, so long as they did not emit distinctive auras, the opponent would not detect their location. Sure enough, seeing not a single abnormal aura fluctuation around, that venerable grew both anxious and furious. He had no more time to waste. He had to conclude this swiftly. He once again activated his divine ring, and the domain that softened all things rapidly enshrouded the surroundings. Then he fixed his gaze intently upon any trace of anomaly. How could Fang Chen and Yu Mingzhu withstand a domain personally unleashed by a venerable? Both of their bodies quickly went limp, and the ground beneath their feet began to melt. It seemed they would be plunged into it once more and have their hiding place exposed. Fang Chen gritted his teeth fiercely and secretly mobilized 3 supreme grade flying swords. Things were different now. Previously, the 3 supreme grade spiritual swords in his possession were the Snow Listening Sword, the Serrated Sword, and the Purple Sword. Among them, only the Snow Listening Sword possessed an artifact spirit. But now the ones he mobilized were Snow, Listening, Purple Lightning, and Blue Frost. All 3 of these swords contained artifact spirits. The sword formation's might was undoubtedly a level higher than before, posing a lethal threat to a venerable who had undergone the first heavenly decline. Moreover, with their extremely close distance, if he struck with a sudden killing blow, catching the opponent off guard, there was still hope of assassinating him. Of course, the prerequisite was that the opponent's vigilance was low, and he hadn't set up sufficient defenses against 2 mere Nascent Soul cultivators. If the opponent remained cautious, Fang Chen would still immediately teleport to escape. Just as Fang Chen was about to make his move, suddenly a vague and ethereal, sinister voice rang out without warning from overhead. That voice sneered chillingly, "You've got the item, yet you still don't flee. How utterly stupid." Fang Chen's entire body trembled. The oppressive pressure in that voice pressed down upon him like a multitude of invisible mountains, causing his body to tremble uncontrollably. The divine transformation, venerable from the divine weapon prefecture's expression, also drastically changed. He abruptly lifted his head to glance at the empty sky, as if instantly understanding something. Terrified out of his wits, he no longer cared about Fang Chen and Yu Mingzhu, immediately teleporting away to escape. However, just as his figure vanished, from the edge of the world, an extremely shrill and agonized scream rolled out, echoing. And then, the divine transformation, venerable from the divine weapon prefecture, was seen being brutally crushed, his body detonated by an invisible, terrifying force. A mist of blood erupted, instantly dyeing a swath of the sky crimson. Cold sweat poured down Fang Chen's face. To instantly kill a venerable of the first heavenly decay, the opponent didn't even have the slightest power to resist. Fang Chen could already imagine what level of existence this entity had reached. Among the Ice Heart Great Venerable, the Young Emperor, and the Golden Scale Great Venerable, one of them was actually drawn into this world as well. No. With the strength of a Great Venerable of the 5 Decays of Heaven, it was utterly impossible to be swept here by a mere spatial fluctuation. It could only be that he had entered of his own volition. Moreover, judging by that tone, he had long been beside the Calamity-Transcending Black Lotus. The reason he hadn't personally plucked it was likely the same as Fang Chen and the others. He had sensed the latent danger within the Calamity-Transcending Black Lotus. Thus, he quietly waited for someone else to harvest it before making his move. But this meant that the other party had long known the calamity. Trans-ending Black Lotus was in this interlayer world, and had come precisely for it. Which great venerable was this? Just as Fang Chen was pondering, another abnormality occurred up ahead. From within the burst of blood mist, a soul the size of a fist, clutching a spatial storage ring containing the calamity, transcending Black Lotus, plunged headfirst into the void. Suddenly, a long, colossal tail swept across the sky like a reaper's scythe, cutting through the heavens. The divine transformation Venerable Soul let out a miserable groan, forcibly swept out from the void. His face filled with terror, he fled madly. What made Fang Chen's expression abruptly turn icy was that this fellow was actually charging desperately in their direction. The divine transformation Venerables Soul clearly intended to divert calamity elsewhere. Fang Chen cursed inwardly, to still be so vicious, with only a wisp of a remnant soul left. In the space of a breath, the divine transformation Venerable Soul had already swept to the vicinity of Fang Chen's hiding place. His heart was full of terror, yet also held a trace of expectation as he cautiously surveyed his surroundings. He quietly waited, hoping that the great venerable of the 5 decays of heaven would make a move. As long as that great venerable leaked even a trace of aura, it would be enough to force the two hidden in the shadows to reveal themselves. Fang Chen's face was covered in frost. At the center of his brow, a soul spike was spinning at high speed. Detecting this trace of soul fluctuation, the remnant soul of the divine transformation Venerable was not angered, but instead delighted. He turned toward the direction where Fang Chen was hiding and revealed a sinister smile. He thought to himself, so you were indeed hiding here. At that very moment, that terrifying colossal tail, blotting out the sky, came sweeping in with whirled, destroying momentum. Fang Chen's heart raced wildly. In a flash, his thoughts spun rapidly. He instantly retracted the soul, frightening spike, and instead brought out the solemn, prisoning chain. Because the calamity, trans-ending Black Lotus, was hidden within this person's spatial storage artifact. That great venerable of the 5 decays of heaven presumably wanted to keep him alive to interrogate him for the unlocking incantation of the storage artifact. Thus, if Fang Chen and Yu Mingzhu wanted to fight for a sliver of survival, there was only one path left. That was to capture this person's soul. Seeing that colossal tail sweeping down with the force of Mount Tai bearing down, the divine transformation Venerable's soul decisively prepared to escape into the void. However, just as his form moved, layer upon layer of chains suddenly materialized around him, firmly shackling him in place. The soul was greatly alarmed, and with a mixture of shock and rage, he roared, "Get off me!" Under that furious roar, cracks instantly spiderwebbed across the chains. Fang Chen's heart jolted. He inwardly cried out, could his solium, prisoning chain, actually not hold him? After all, when it was used to imprison the Dharma aspect stage half-giant previously, it had suppressed him effortlessly. He then suddenly understood. The half-giant soul was only half-human, the other half was some pitch, black, unknown substance. But the divine transformation Venerable before him possessed a genuine divine transformation realm soul. With the soul power of his 9 orifice Nascent Soul, to forcibly restrain it was indeed somewhat of a stretch. This fleeting mistake allowed that world, destroying colossal tail, to instantly bear down upon their heads. The Venerable Soul was scared out of its wits, letting out a hysterical shriek. Quickly let me go. Fang Chen's heart also shook violently. Could it be that it was already too late? At this critical juncture, a flash of inspiration struck his mind, and he suddenly recalled something. The next moment, a phantom image of an emerald, green eye, abruptly manifested at his abdomen, extremely eerie. That phantom emerald, green eye, coldly swept its gaze toward the divine transformation Venerable Soul. Without hesitation, Fang Chen shouted in a deep voice, "Soften all things."